Horse is kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.
Howdy there, I'm Matt McKinley and we're burning daylight.
In the saddle till the job's done right.
Welcome to Burning Daylight, the only podcast for the working cowboy.
Fancy.
Well, welcome back, Daylight Burners. This is emergency episode. Never before in the history of our country have we had such a weird thing happen. We have a former president being indicted on 4 counts by the federal government and conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights are the 4 counts.
Conspiracy against rights?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of rights?
I don't know, but this is
I thought the rights were his people. So
but this is in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, United States of America versus Donald J. Trump. The grand jury charges that at all times material to this indictment on or about the dates and the approximate times stated below. The defendant, Donald J. Trump, was the 45th president of the United States and a candidate for re-election in 2020. I hold on before we go any further. What song pops into your head when you're talking about such a momentous occurrence of bullshit that we have going on right now?
what
What
song?
Yeah, like you got
I
any?
can't think of any songs
those-
right now because Matt Wilson's Burning Daylight songs in my head now.
Oh, okay.
I can't think of anything.
But like,
What do you got?
10 soldiers and Nixon coming.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But it's so much gayer than Kent State. It's like
I'll think of. Yeah. No, it's really okay. Keep going.
what? Just I don't know what song you got nothing.
No, I got nothing right now. I'll think about
Okay.
it. You keep going. I'll think
Okay,
about it.
well, because
Okay.
mine might change before we reach the
I
end
know.
of this deal. So,
Yeah.
but my
Anyway.
initial is what is the name of that song? Ohio.
Her found her dead on the ground. How would you run? When you
Is
know?
that
It's
Simon and Garfunkel, isn't it?
no. It's
Or is
Neil
it Neil
Young.
Young? Neil
Yeah.
Young. Oh yeah, I'd play it on Spotify, but he pulled his music because
He did?
Joe Rogan took horse paste. Remember?
Oh, that's really dumb.
Yeah, it was really dumb. I think it's still on there though. I don't know. It's weird.
I
Anyway,
could love
introduction to this indictment. The defendant, Donald J. Trump, was the 45th president of the United States and a candidate for re-election in 2020. The defendant lost the 2020 presidential election. They show no proof of that. 2,
Nice.
despite having lost, the defendant was determined to remain in power. So for more than 2 months following Election Day on November 3rd, 2020, the defendant spread lies that there had been outcome determinative fraud in the
Lies
election.
according to whom? I think that's very subjective.
Right. Outcome determinative fraud in the election and that he had actually won. These claims were false and the defendant knew they were false. But the defendant repeated repeated and widely disseminated them anyway, making his
Has the
knowingly false.
defendant ever been recorded, secretly recorded saying, I know they were false, but I just did it for the fun?
Not that I'm aware of.
So then how can they say he knew it was false? Like, how do they do that?
See, I don't know. I don't know. We disseminated them anyway to make his knowingly false claims appear legitimate, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger, and erode public faith in the administration of the election.
It's on the Spotify.
Okay. Which one? Neil Young?
Yeah.
Yeah. Weird. Apparently, I don't know, Neil Young.
Maybe it's someone. I think it's him. It says it's Neil Young.
Huh.
Maybe not. Maybe it's
he
someone
probably
else.
does. I think he sold his catalog anyways, so like he doesn't even own it.
Okay.
It's just his name on it anymore.
Maybe.
3, the defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he had won. He was also entitled to formally challenge
Are
the
you
results
gonna put it on the screen so I can read it too?
Oh, sorry. There we go. That's okay.
Conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding.
Yeah.
Come on. How can they even?
Wow. The defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election. He was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means.
Okay.
Such as seeking recounts or audits of the popular vote through in states or filing lawsuits challenging ballots and procedures. Through lawful and appropriate means, such as seeking recounts or audits of the popular votes in states. Indeed, many cases the defendant did pursue the methods of contesting the election results. His efforts to change the outcome in any state through recounts, audits, or legal challenges were uniformly unsuccessful.
Okay.
That part's true. Yeah, he didn't win anything on that.
No.
As far as that goes. For shortly after Election Day, the defendant also pursued unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results. In doing so, the defendant perpetuated 3 criminal conspiracies. Hold on, let's see. He also pursued unlawful means. So
of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results. How did he do that? Unlawful means. What were the unlawful means?
Okay, yeah. So this is the first time they're alleging unlawful means. All right. So in doing so, the defendant perpetuated 3 criminal conspiracies. A conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential elections are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government in violation of 18 U.S.C. 371.
Can you believe that? Dishonesty.
A conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit. Well, deceit is not in and of itself a crime. Dishonesty is not in and of itself a crime. Fraud is. Fraud is a clearly defined crime anyways. Dishonesty is, yeah, that's that's a character trait, not
right.
not a legal definition. Deceit also, I mean, that may have more of a concrete legal definition, but dishonesty does not. Like that's a character trait.
Right.
Anyway, to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government.
Okay.
See,
But how?
Yeah, I don't know. We got to see. And so the second one, B, a conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding at which the collected results of the presidential election are counted and certified, aka the certification proceeding, in violation of 18 USC 151, 1512K, and C.
All right.
Conspiracy.
So what are those? 18 USC 371.
All right. And then C is a conspiracy against the right to vote and have one's vote counted in violation of 18 USC 241.
Well, 18 USC 371 is a conspiracy to commit offense or to defraud the United States.
All right. So there's one thing I've noticed so far is there's no mention of insurrection. So
well, let's see, because 18 USC 1512K is tampering with a witness, victim, or an informant.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe 18 USC 241 is, let's see, 241. Unlawful for two or more persons to agree to injure, threaten, or intimidate a person in the United States in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured by the Constitution or laws of the United States, or because of his or her having exercised such a right. Conspiracy against the rights. That's one you read.
Yeah. So repeat that one again.
18 USC 241, conspiracy against rights. When two or more persons agree to injure, threaten, or intimidate a person in the United States in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured by the Constitution or laws of the United States, or because of his or her having exercised such a right.
Well, we'll see what they have to say as far as evidence goes. Present the evidence, because I don't know, but this one's still like there's no reference to having incited an insurrection. So and that's the one that would cause him to be disqualified from running for office under the, I think it's like the 14th Amendment.
Is it that, or is it just any of them?
Well, no, because like there's no qualification that a felon can't be president of the United States
or can't run.
Yeah, the only provision was it was one of the Reconstruction amendments, and I think it's the 14th Amendment that, you know, like having been part of an insurrection against the United States of America, you're no longer able to hold public office.
Okay.
And so, but that would mean they would have to prove an insurrection or of some sort.
Well,
and
going.
But that's not mentioned in the charges, so.
Well, is that all of them right there? Just those three?
Yeah. Well, those are the three criminal conspiracies, and Let's see. Conspiracy to defraud
Defraud.
a conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. So no, there's nothing about an insurrection in there.
Well, why
So
don't you go Control F and look for the word insurrection?
Command F.
These claims were false, and the defendant knew they were false. I mean,
I'm not seeing insurrection.
riot?
Hold on. Let me. I'm gonna go full boomer mode here and like, say I don't know, if I did that right. Find insurrection.
You know how to spell that?
It's 2 R's, isn't it?
I don't know.
No results found for insurrection. Okay. All right. Well,
All right, keep going. It's 45 pages, isn't it?
yeah, it's we got a bunch to go still.
All right. What else they got? Keep going.
Each of these conspiracies, which built upon the widespread mistrust the defendant was creating through pervasive and destabilizing lies about the election fraud.
I don't think any of them are lies. I think every election is.
Yeah. Targeted a bedrock function of the United States federal government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential elections, the federal government function. That's not the federal government's charge, though, is like the states control the elections. The federal government is there to count what the states have provided.
Right.
Like,
well, the federal government is there to certify.
Mm-hmm.
What are you drinking?
Coors Light.
Where's?
Let's see. All right. So, targeted a bedrock function of the United States government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. Okay. Well,
Well, as it was, how many senators were like, no?
There was a handful, and there was a handful in the House too. And they did the same thing when Trump was elected in 2016, except they were Democrats that
right.
That what do they call that when they
right when they stand up and
object?
Yeah,
there was a whole bunch of Democrats that objected in 2016, or I guess 2017 when they were certifying, and I don't know that like that whole thing. Well, all right. So before we got a bunch to go through. So count 1, conspiracy to defraud the United States.
Come on.
The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 of this indictment are realleged and fully incorporated here by reference.
Okay.
The conspiracy from on or about November 14th, 2020 through on or about January 20th, 2021 in the District of Columbia and elsewhere, the defendant Donald J. Trump did knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators known and unknown to the grand jury to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, which once again is not a crime, like fraud and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government.
I think the fact that that says known and unknown to the grand jury is making a conspiracy theory in itself.
Right. There's just so much we don't even know.
This
is just what we know, guys.
Any of you.
This is just what we know.
It could be, and there's stuff we don't know.
There could be Russian aliens, alien Russians behind this. We don't even know.
Russians are aliens. What are you talking about?
No, but like aliens, but they're also Russian.
But if they're not from here, they're aliens. It doesn't matter. You're not allowed to use that word anymore.
It's
rude.
Don't tell me what to do, woman.
Yeah, I know.
Known and unknown to the grand jury to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit. I need to.
I want the proof where he's like, okay, this is dishonest, but we're gonna use it.
Right. I need to know Rob's legal interpretation of like, is dishonesty actually a crime? Because that doesn't seem.
Where is Rob?
He's in Arizona.
Supposed to be like 182 degrees there today. Why is he?
I know. Rob made an Auschwitz joke about Phoenix.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It was wild.
Let's see. Is dishonesty a crime?
Okay, you look that up. And purpose of the conspiracy. 7. The purpose of the conspiracy.
Is dishonesty a sin? That's different.
Was to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential elections by knowingly false claims of election fraud, to obstruct the federal government function by which those results are collected, counted, and certified. The defendant's co-conspirators. The defendant enlisted co-conspirators to assist. Who are the
co-conspirators?
Huh?
Who are the co-conspirators? They're the ones that are unknown to us, unknown to the jury.
We're about to meet them.
They are
enlisted co-conspirators to assist him
with the matter.
Yes, exactly. Familiar with the matter.
Do you want to hear about dishonesty?
Yes.
Crimes of dishonesty may not put anyone's life at risk like violent crimes do, but they are still serious offenses that can be penalized with harsh and even life-changing penalties. Dishonesty offenses can occur in many different circumstances, however, usually involve property or money. The most common dishonesty offenses are stealing and fraud. Dishonesty offenses range in severity. The penalty likely to be imposed on you is dependent on your charge and your particular circumstances. Crime means a misdemeanor or a felony. Hold on. A crime of dishonesty means any offense defined as a... And then that's where it stops, so that's not helpful.
Huh.
Oops, I'm not
okay, well, all right, so I retract my previous statement saying that dishonesty is not a crime. Apparently it is a crime as well as a character trait, but...
Okay, here's this. Dishonesty or fraudulent act, they seem to go together, dishonesty and fraud. Any dishonest or fraudulent act, including larceny and embezzlement, as defined by blah, 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 to cause the insured to sustain a loss, to obtain financial benefit for the perpetrator or any other person. A dishonest or fraudulent act does not mean or include a reckless act, a negligent act, or a grossly negligent act. So.
Interesting, because...
Yeah.
There is a lot of stuff that the government has done.
Right.
Like from top to bottom of government employees, whether they be elected or not, that could constitute a crime of dishonesty that has not been prosecuted hardly at all. Exactly. And then most of the time just kind of like written off.
Well, I mean, okay, here's this. Oh, well, this is Scottish law, so I don't know if this helps, but every type of dishonesty charge likely to come before, well, this is Scottish. Dishonesty is theft, embezzlement, fraud, benefit fraud, money laundering, bribery, corruption, extortion, proceeds from crime, online crime, intellectual property crime, online copyright infringement, tax evasion, and white collar crime.
So, like being a politician.
I know, basically. Yeah. I mean.
Okay. Well, okay. So the defendant enlisted co-conspirators to assist him in his criminal efforts to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 election and retain power. Among these were A, co-conspirator 1, an attorney who was willing to spread knowingly false claims
Giuliani?
and pursue strategies that the defendant's 2020 re-election campaign attorneys would not. It's got to be Rudy or Sidney Powell.
That lady? Well,
or Lynn Wood.
Two.
That one too. Or co-conspirator 2, an attorney who devised and attempted to implement a strategy to leverage the vice president's ceremonial role overseeing the certification proceeding to obstruct the certification of the presidential election. That's got to be Rudy. So I bet co-conspirator 1 is probably Sidney Powell. Maybe
okay, well,
Lynn
there's another
Wood.
one down there.
Yeah, and then there's
a bunch.
Oh, there's a bunch. Yeah. All right. So co-conspirator 3, an attorney whose unfounded claims of election fraud.
That makes me so mad.
I know. The defendant privately acknowledged to others sounded crazy. Nonetheless, the defendant embraced and publicly amplified co-conspirator 3's disinformation.
Who was that one?
Yeah, I am not sure. Co-conspirator 4, a Justice Department official who worked on civil matters and who, with the defendant, attempted to use the Justice Department to open sham election crime investigations and influence state legislatures with knowingly false claims of election fraud.
Knowingly false. Come on. What are you choking on? Are you allergic to something?
Maybe. I'm allergic to co-conspirators.
No, you're allergic to whatever.
Co-conspirator 5, an attorney who assisted in devising and attempting to implement a plan to submit fraudulent states of presidential electors to obstruct the certification proceeding.
What? Who did that?
I'm not sure.
That's the first I've heard of it.
And co-conspirator 6, a political consultant who helped implement a plan to submit fraudulent fraudulent slates of presidential electors to obstruct the certification proceeding.
Now it's going to give you a little history lesson.
Yeah, history lesson here, folks. Federal government function. The federal government function by which the results of the election for president of the United States are collected, counted, and certified was established through the Constitution and Electoral Count Act, a federal law enacted in 1887. The Constitution provided that individuals called electors select the president and that each state determine for itself how to appoint electors apportioned to it. Through state laws, each of the 50 states and the District of Columbia chose to select their electors based on the popular vote in the state. After Election Day, the ECA required each state to formally determine or ascertain the electors who would represent the state's voters by casting electoral votes on behalf of the candidate who had won the popular vote, and required the executive of each state to certify the federal government the identities of those electors. Then on a date set by ECA, all right, required to meet.
They cast a vote.
So that all culminates to January 6th. Along with the state executive certification that they were the state's legitimate electors to the United States Congress to be accounted and certified in an official proceeding. Finally, the Constitution and the ECA require that the 6th of January following Election Day, Congress meet in a joint session for the certification proceeding, presided over by the Vice President of the United States of the Senate, as President of the Senate, to count the electoral votes, resolve any objections, and announce the results. thus certifying the winner of the presidential election as president-elect. The
Right.
federal government functions, blah blah blah, is foundational to the United States
It's
democratic process.
been respected for over 130 years. This is the first time
Yeah.
anybody even knew that they could object.
Right. Manners and means. The defendant's conspiracy to impair, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function through dishonesty, fraud, and deceit included the following manner and means. That's a bunch here. Okay. The defendant and co-conspirators used knowingly false claims of election fraud to get state legislators and election officials to subvert the legitimate election results and change the electoral votes for the defendant's opponent. Okay. That one. All right. So they use knowingly false claims of election fraud to get state legislators and election officials to subvert the legitimate election results. How?
Yeah, when?
Now, did the state legislatures raise alarm, or did they like take it upon themselves? And also, like, the federal government cannot weigh in on state law.
Right. But
Like
it's
that.
not saying that they tried to change the law.
Well, no, either way, even if they, so let's say that the state legislator, um, was a, one of the illegitimate electors or something like that. That's not a federal crime. That would be a crime under state law, which the feds have no jurisdiction.
It might be. You might need to look that up. It might be if it's a federal election.
No, because the feds have no, and especially since the Supreme Court struck down a big chunk of the voter, it was like part of the Civil Rights Act, like the Voter Right Act or something like that. That put a bunch of the southern states under like particular scrutiny by the federal government. Like the Supreme Court kind of did away with that. So like it's pretty well established that like the feds don't have much say over the elections. Like all the feds do is certify what the states give to them.
Okay. Well,
because in the Constitution it leaves it up to the states to decide how
to do it.
Yeah, like the Constitution, the federally, it's like, hey, general elections on this day, inaugurations on here and there, but the rest of it goes back to the states. So if it was a state legislator or whatever that they tried to change the law within the state, that's not under the Department of Justice's purview. Like that's under state purview, not federal.
Okay. So what is this? The defendant pushed officials in certain states to ignore the popular vote, disenfranchise millions of voters, dismiss legitimate electors, and ultimately cause the ascertainment of and voting by illegitimate electors. How come they had to get illegitimate electors? Why didn't they just get those people in the first place? Like, how did they get illegitimate electors?
See, I don't know. I
because
really...
every state has their electors. They do their whatever, their convention.
Yeah.
And then those people are the people who are selected. So why don't they just, I don't understand. If you were selected and you were an elector, then don't you think you would know when the date and time of your plane ticket to go to DC would be?
Well, that's not the issue. Is like they had their slate of electors.
Mm-hmm.
And those were chosen by whoever they were supposed to be chosen by.
Right.
But they didn't go along with Trump and like refusing to vote for Joe Biden. And like they wanted to throw, like they wanted just a handful of electors to throw it to where nobody had a majority, and it would go back to the House of Representatives to elect the president. Because that's how it would work. Is if you don't have a clear majority of of the in the electoral college,
Right.
then it kicks it down to the House of Representatives, and then they cast ballots, I think, by state.
Yeah.
And
Well, I'm
and
looking at
then
the
that's
I'm looking at the next one. B. The defendant and co-conspirators organized fraudulent slates of electors in 7 targeted states. How? Like, how come they waited? How did they not have those people ready in the first place?
right. So those states were Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Attempting to mimic the procedures, and then the legitimate electors were
That,
supposed to follow. Oh, the legitimate electors
yeah.
were supposed to follow under the Constitution,
So they had
uh, and
two
other federal and state laws.
electoral meetings going on. One legit one, and then one, hey, you guys are the fake ones.
Yeah. So
But we're
like
gonna.
they had the slate of electors that were chosen before the election. I think
Why
all
didn't
that's
they? Why didn't they just choose them in the first place? Like, why weren't
um
they organized enough to be there before?
because they're Republicans, and they have no ground game anywhere really. Um,
This included causing the fraudulent electors to meet on the day appointed by federal law on which legitimate electors were to gather and cast their votes, cast fraudulent votes for the defendant, and signs. So they just showed up earlier than the real voters. So then they were the voters. They were the electors. I mean, like, whoever gets there first is the elector, right?
um, like possession is 9/10 of the law, right?
Yeah. I mean, some fraudulent electors were tricked into participating based on the understanding that their votes would be used only if the defendant succeeded in outcome determinative lawsuits within their state, which the defendant never did. What?
All right, so they got people on board by saying, "Hey, cast your votes, and these are only going to be counted if Trump wins the lawsuit in this state." So, and he had lawsuits in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, and
New Mexico.
yeah, New Mexico, and so they're like, okay, well, because I'm guessing they're saying like, well, I don't want to break the law, but he's like, no, this is only gonna happen if the court reverses this decision, or sides on my behalf here. And so I guess that's where the dishonesty part would come into play.
That doesn't make any sense.
No, it,
How did these people even get involved? How did they find these electors? They never called me. Did they call you?
no, well, no,
No.
but I can't remember if I was probably registered libertarian, so they weren't going to call me anyways. But um, and also like all my social media was shut down for the most part. So only if you followed me did you know about me, and I don't guess any of the Trump team followed me. So
Yeah, but who are they picking? Just random Republicans?
um
And be like, hey, you're the elector. No, you have to go. You have to go to the.
random in the sense that they just followed whatever Trump's legal, because honestly I don't think Trump had much of a plan. He was just like, I'm calling bullshit, I think I won. um and he just kind of jumped onto whatever conspiracy there was. I mean, there was the Dominion voting machines, which
Right.
I do think warranted an audit, because there was one race in Michigan that they got wrong. Like, it ended up being tallied wrong, and it ended up flipping the other way. Initially called the race for a Democrat, and then when they retabulated, it was Republican, but they did catch it. But still, I thought that alone should have warranted a recount, at least in, I think it was in Michigan, or an audit of those machines. But that being said, Dominion just sued Fox News and settled
Right.
for like $750 million,
Yeah.
and Fox News admitted guilt on that.
Right.
And so
Right.
you're like,
So
so
that
the
doesn't help.
minion thing was bullshit.
Yeah, but
Because
Fox News is also a bitch, so, and that's un-American.
no, but I mean that's true, but also when they settle, they also very rarely admit fault when they settle. Like they'll pay you, but they don't. This one they admitted fault,
What'd they
and so
say?
that's how that they had knowingly spread um allegations that were proven
They
to be
were like, it
false.
wasn't actually us, it was Tucker
No, it's
Carlson.
funny is that Tucker was like mentioned in the lawsuit, but he wasn't like a target of the lawsuit. So, and then
Huh.
he claims that he was getting ready to release an interview with the chief of the Capitol Hill Police uh
Oh yeah.
that saying about there was a whole bunch of feds involved with January 6th. So and
Yeah, you
then
know it was
yeah,
there.
they never aired it and they fired him. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
um
Uh-huh.
so anyway, here we're at.
Yeah, what's
This
the last
included
line? The defendant and co-conspirators then caused these fraudulent electors to transmit their false certificates
to the
to
vice
the vice
president.
president. And but that's the part I don't get. If those people who were deceived and they thought they were electors, then don't they have some ground to stand on? Say, no, we were certified as electors. We were told we were. We signed the certificate. We
Right.
signed our, so we are. So then
Well,
when,
and also like all they did was like hand Mike Pence an envelope that had a different tally. Like it was
right, but they were under the impression that they were electors, and so weren't they? I mean, if you were
right.
told by the government that you were, then you are.
Okay, but even so, and they're not charging any of these electors, as far as I can tell.
Well, no,
Uh,
at least I don't think they are, but
but even so, they are guilty, or Trump is allegedly guilty of convincing these people to write a different outcome on a allegedly
where are the
official ballot
legit
and turn it
electors?
in.
Right.
What?
Where are the legit electors at this point? Aren't they like, hello, don't you want our ballots?
Yeah, which I don't know. Either way, like it's just like you are you're being charged with high crimes for making shit confusing for a little bit. Like
Well,
that's
yeah,
essentially
but
what they did. Like, all right, so who's actually voting here?
yeah. And then who's to say? Well, like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that whoever came in and rounded up all of these fake electors, how are they not the real electors? Like, I don't know if what I'm saying is
It's
making,
like
but it seems
trying to
to me
okay, this is
that
like
it,
trying to sneak into the movie theater. Three kids on top of each other's shoulders in a trench coat, trying to sneak into the movie theater. But they're like, no, you can't come in here. But you don't like bring a federal case against them. You're just like, no, get out of here. That's kind of how I feel about these
yeah, but
other
I just don't
electors.
understand how these the fake electors, how they got their stuff in before the real electors. And if they thought they were electors, then why, then they are electors. Like if they thought they were electors, don't they have a case?
Well, not really, because if it's not certified by the governor of the
How they
state,
get duped?
um, you
How
saw
many
how
are,
people you saw how people were after that election.
yeah, but
It's
how many are there, like from Nevada? How many are there?
we had what, 6 electoral votes,
Yeah,
so
but how many electors are there?
it'd be 6.
I think we need to look that up because of a long time ago when I went to the primary and then I was selected to be a delegate, it was like a huge thing.
Yeah.
And there were so many people. So I don't know that
But
there's just 6
how the
people.
electoral votes go is one for each senator and one for each
Well, yeah, right. But the
representative.
electors, I don't know that there's only just like the same number of electors as there are electoral votes. Like,
No,
isn't
no,
there a whole
that's literally what it is. You're an elector for the electoral college, and the
yes,
electoral
I know
college is
that.
based off of the number of
Yes, I
senators
know that
and
too.
yeah. So that's so there's one for each, and yeah, that's how it
I'm
works.
sure
I mean,
that.
so Wyoming has 3 electors to the electoral college. Nevada has, I think, 6. It might be 7, but I think it's 6.
No, there's 6.
Yeah. So, but those are like the electoral votes for the state are certified by like the state secretary of state and then or the governor, however
But
that
it's like a
eventually
big
works.
deal to be an elector.
Yes.
So, I'm just trying to figure out how the legit electors got hoodwinked.
I don't think they did. It was a case of these other electors that Trump convinced to come there were just like they were just like shoving their votes in Mike Pence's face, and he's like, "Hey, what? No, no, I'm not doing that because they
How
weren't
did they
certified by the state."
how did they even get their how did they even get to DC?
I don't know. Let's continue because I'm not for sure.
That's what I'm
But
saying. If you're a legit elector, you already know you're going to DC to cast
right,
your votes. So you already got your plane ticket. You're already there. Then these other 6 people show up and they're like, "No, we're the electors. No, we are. No, we are." Like, come on.
right. Well, and then
It's
you
even right here in this article from November 12th, 2020 from the Reno News. These are who have been selected, and they publish their names in the newspaper.
mm-hmm.
So here's their names. They're published in the paper. It says the Nevada Democratic Party chose these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, 7 people. Since Biden won the statewide popular vote, the Democratic Party's chosen electors will represent Nevada in the Electoral College.
Mm-hmm.
Mailer, who is the chair of the Washoe County Democratic Party, will cast the votes for Northern Nevada's House District. Northern Nevada is represented by blah, blah, blah. It's a big honor. It's a big honor. On the Monday after the second Wednesday in December, the individual electoral colleges in all 50 states meet to officially cast their votes. This year's meeting in Nevada will take place December 14th in Carson City. Nevada is one of 33 states with a law requiring electors to vote for the winner of the popular vote in the state, according to fairvote.org. If an elector opts to vote for another candidate, there is no penalty, but their vote is canceled and they're replaced by another elector. The certificates signed during the Electoral College meeting are then sent to various officers in the state and federal government. On January 6, 2021, a joint session of Congress will meet to count the votes and declare the results, according to blah, blah, blah. And then there's like pictures of these people. So I don't understand where the fake electors came from.
Well,
I just don't see how that's a thing. Like, they know who they're supposed to be. They're sworn to oath or whatever. They're certified. And then they know when everyone's meeting. It's all pomp and circumstance. And these 6 people, 7 people are the people they're expecting to see there. And then 7 random other people show up. I don't see how the senators in the Democratic Party were going to let that happen. Does that make sense?
yeah, well, they didn't, but like these people just showed up anyway, and but they were only supposed to show up if the courts reversed, the outcome of the election because they were alleging all this election fraud, and all of those lawsuits got thrown out, like, and a lot of them by judges that Trump appointed himself.
Appointed. Right.
And
All right. Well,
yeah, so let's see.
go back up then to B. Go back up to B.
B.
Yeah, this one. Okay. This included causing the fraudulent electors to meet on the day appointed. So did they know they were fraudulent?
No, because they thought they were only gonna like their votes were only gonna count if the courts sided one way or the other, or sided in their favor, I guess. Let's see. Signed
Okay.
certificates. The legitimate electors were to gather and cast their votes, cast fraudulent votes for the defendant, and sign certificates falsely representing that they were legitimate electors. Some fraudulent electors were tricked into participating based on the understanding that their votes would be used only if the defendant succeeded in outcome determinative lawsuits within their state.
Well, then that seems to me that the Republican Party of Nevada was like, okay, well, you 6 are our electors, and we're going to send if Trump wins Nevada. So,
yeah.
okay.
Essentially, they're convicting, or they're trying to convict him of losing a lawsuit. Essentially,
Right, or doing
because all of this stuff was like minus the storming of the Capitol. Everything done, as far as I could tell, was lawful. Like even the Georgia deal, but we don't know what's going on like behind the scenes of that case that they're trying to build. But like I listened to that whole phone call that he made with the Secretary of State, and Trump talks like a mob guy. Like he's very slick on how he phrases shit. And he said, I need and you got to find me these votes. We just need this many votes. But he never gave a direct order to do anything illegal. And you're just
threaten.
Does it sound shady? Sure, but did he actually order anybody to do anything? No.
Okay.
All right, so the defendant and co-conspirators attempted to use the power and authority of the Justice Department to conduct sham election crime investigations and send a letter to the targeted states that falsely claimed that the Justice Department had identified significant concerns that may have impacted the election outcome. That
strongly worded letter.
Yeah, that sought to advance the defendant's fraudulent elector plan by using the Justice Department's authority to falsely present the fraudulent electors as a valid alternative to the legitimate electors, and that urged on behalf of the Justice Department the targeted states' legislatures to convene to create the opportunity to choose the fraudulent electors over the legitimate electors. Okay, so they attempted to use the power, but they never did. Like, if you can attempt, but as long as, like, essentially the state the states told him to fuck off.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going with your electors, so there wasn't really any crime committed there, you know?
I just want to know who these co-conspirators were, because it seems like all these states were involved too.
Mm-hmm.
So then, is it not just normal everyday business? Everyday government?
Kinda, except that, like, he was like trying to create this, like, he was like trying to mimic what the states had decided, but with his own people. I mean, so he's just like, it was as an alternate slate of electors is what he was trying to make. And okay, but nobody bought into it at all.
But
like everybody.
Didn't they already have that's what the Republican Party is his slate of electors.
Right.
Okay. Keep going.
Yeah. So, but like, nothing happened with that. Like,
right.
I think my analogy of the little kids in a trench coat trying to sneak into the movie theaters, like they just like stopped them at the door and be like, hey, no, you can't do that. Get out of here.
So weird.
Yeah. So the defendant and co-conspirators attempted to enlist the vice president to use his ceremonial role at the January 6th certification, proceeding to fraudulently alter the election results. First, using knowingly false claims of election fraud, the defendant and co-conspirators attempted to convince the vice president to use the defendant's fraudulent electors, reject legitimate electoral votes, or send legitimate electoral votes to state legislatures for review rather than counting them. When that failed on the morning of January 6th, the defendant and co-conspirators repeated knowingly false claims of election fraud to gathered supporters, falsely told them that the vice president had authority to and might alter the election of the proceeding and exert pressure on the vice president to take
election results. And directed them to the Capitol to obstruct the certification proceeding.
Yeah.
He did not.
Yeah, and he also said peacefully and patriotically.
Right.
Did he get him riled up? Like, absolutely.
But doesn't he every single time?
Right, but also like he did make it clear, go peacefully.
Right.
Like, did he say some stupid shit? Yeah. When doesn't he say some stupid shit? Saying stupid shit is not a crime.
Right.
Or it shouldn't be. At least it's not supposed to be under the First Amendment, you know?
Right.
Okay, so then directed him to the Capitol to obstruct the certification proceedings and exert pressure on the vice president to take the fraudulent actions he had previously refused. And then C, after it became public on the afternoon of January 6th that the vice president would not fraudulently alter the election results, a large and angry crowd, including many of individuals whom the defendant had deceived into believing the vice president could and might change the election results, violently attacked the Capitol and halted the proceeding. As violence ensued, the defendant and co-conspirators exploited the disruption by redoubling efforts to levy false claims of election fraud and convince members of Congress to further delay the certification based on those claims.
Jeez.
Okay. That seems really weak. As far as like from a legal standpoint, like the indictment on the classified documents seems like pretty solid, and I'd have to look at or listen to some legal experts. Like I'm interested to see what Judge Andrew Napolitano says, Jonathan Turley, see what he says. I'd be interested to see what Rob says about this indictment. I don't know if he'll read the whole thing or not, but this seems pretty flimsy. Like, and that's being pretty generous on I think.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
All right, all right. So the defendant's knowledge of the falsity of his election fraud claims. This could be good. All right, let's see what they got here. The defendant, his co-conspirators, and their agents made knowingly false claims that there had been outcome determinative fraud in the 2020 presidential election. These prolific lies about election fraud included dozens of specific claims that there had been substantial fraud in certain states, such as that large numbers of dead, non-resident, non-citizen, or otherwise ineligible voters had cast ballots, or that voting machines had changed votes for the defendant to votes for Biden. These claims were false, and the defendant knew they were false. In fact, the defendant was notified repeatedly that his claims were untrue, often by the people on whom he relied for candid advice on important matters and who were best positioned to know the facts, and he deliberately disregarded the truth. Huh. Okay. This I feel like I need another beer for this one. I want to. Maybe we're about to find something really groundbreaking. Maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe. All right. The defendant's vice president who personally stood to gain by remaining in office as part of the defendant's ticket, and whom the defendant asked to study fraud allegations, told the defendant he had seen no evidence of outcome determinative fraud. B. So Mike Pence said he had seen no evidence of it, and Trump didn't believe him, I guess. B. The senior leaders of the Justice Department appointed by the defendant and responsible for investigating credible allegations of election crimes told the defendant on multiple occasions that various allegations of fraud were unsupported. So that would have been Bill Barr, whoever's below him, and
Right.
all right. So C, the director of national intelligence, the defendant's principal advisor on intelligence matters related to national security, disabused the defendant of the notion that the intelligence community's findings regarding foreign interference would change the outcome of the election.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and then D, Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. You might remember hearing about this. You maybe, I talk a lot, so you probably don't remember, but we talked about this on the Twitter Files episode here a while back. Matt Taibbi established a clear connection between at least Twitter, but if Twitter is like the third major social media platform, depends on how you classify YouTube. I think YouTube would probably be the biggest, but
You
it's
think
like YouTube,
is?
Facebook, Instagram, and then Twitter. And TikTok's in there too. So anyway, Twitter's down the line. So if they were doing this shit with Twitter, they were doing it with Facebook, and he identified this exact department, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Basically had a, like the old like the red telephone that the president used to have with Russia, kind of the same way between that department and Twitter or Facebook or whoever else, whatever social media apparatus. So whose existence the defendant signed into law to protect the nation's cybersecurity infrastructure from attack. If that doesn't tell you how ill prepared Donald Trump was to actually, drain the swamp, this department did not exist until Donald Trump signed it into law. And then they were instrumental in this whole indictment.
Then they conspired against him.
Yeah. And so when people will always criticize Ron Paul because he never had a solution. He's like, well, he had a good enough solution. Don't do that. Vote no on that.
Right.
And yeah, if Donald Trump would have vetoed that, then this whole office right there would not have been able to implicate him in this indictment because they wouldn't have existed. Joined an official multi-agency statement that there was no evidence any voting system had been compromised, and that declared the 2020 election was the most secure in American history. That sounds like a Trump statement because that's kind of what
Everyone knows.
Everyone knows.
Most secure ever.
Huge security. Best ever. Everybody knows it.
Everyone knows. Ask anyone. Ask that guy.
I went over to North Korea and I said, hey, Kim Jong, what do you think? And he said, what do you know? This is the best security I've ever seen. Most secure election ever. I know a thing about secure elections. And he said, wow, what a secure election.
Wow, most secure I've ever seen.
And I said, what about you, Kim Jong? What a loser. Your elections are a fraud.
You have a bowl haircut.
Days later, after the CISA director, whom the defendant had appointed, announced publicly that election security experts were in agreement that claims of computer-based election fraud were unsubstantiated, and the defendant fired him.
Heck yeah.
C, senior White House attorneys selected by the defendant to provide him candid advice informed the defendant there was no evidence of outcome determinative election fraud and told him that his presidency would end on inauguration day in 2021. Okay, I mean, that is their advice and their opinion. Like, was it rooted in fact? I think absolutely, but they don't get to determine when he leaves office. Like, that's not up to them. They can offer their best legal advice. He does not have to take it, you know?
Well, yeah, but
And so like they're saying that he knowingly, like, he may have been aware of what they were telling to him, but I don't think he believed that what they were telling him was true.
no, I don't
think he
think he
truly
believed it at all either.
I think he truly believed that the machines were rigged and the whole thing was rigged. I mean, he's always, unless he wins the election, he denies it. It was the same
Right.
way in the primaries, you know. And I don't know if there's anything criminal about that. You know, is it a major
that's
character flaw? Like, yeah, absolutely, but
That's the part up here that just is like knowingly. Knowingly to who?
yeah.
Quit. Stop
Well,
it.
he could have been told that, but he'd be like, yeah, I know you told me that, but I don't think that's right.
I don't believe it.
Right. Yeah, and so like
Lies. Everyone's against me.
yeah, I don't know. And like, if he would have succeeded and then this came out, yeah, then you would have absolutely have a case against him, but
Right.
it didn't work. It didn't work, and the people that were supposed to go along with it, like the important people that were supposed to go along with it did not. So
Didn't.
I mean,
Just double down.
yeah, and so he just kind of looks stupid, but is that a
Right.
I don't know. I guess we'll see. Is that a crime? Senior staffers
Not
on
a crime to look stupid.
right. I mean,
then President Biden would be.
he's the best president ever. You know, he's just a strong and virile young 80 years old.
Under arrest, virile and
Jack.
vigorous.
Yeah, senior staffers on the defendant's 2020 re-election campaign. Defendant's campaign was what they'll be referred to further on, whose sole mission was the defendant's re-election, told the defendant on November 7th, 2020, that he only had a 5 to 10% chance of prevailing in the election, and that success was contingent on the defendant winning ongoing vote counts or
It's their fault then.
Yeah. Ongoing vote counts or litigation in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. Within a week of that assessment, the defendant lost in Arizona, meaning he had lost the election. State legislators and officials, many of them who were the defendant's political allies, had voted for him and wanted him to be reelected, repeatedly informed the defendant that his claims of fraud in their states were unsubstantiated or false and resisted his pressure to act based upon them. So that's probably directly related to that call with
Georgia.
Yeah, I forget, is it I think Raffensperger, maybe.
Roethlisberger? No, he's from.
No, that's a rapist,
Pittsburgh.
not a state legislator.
Well, what's the difference? You don't know that.
Well, true.
That's a very, very broad statement, Cotton.
Yeah. State and federal courts, the neutral arbiters responsible for ensuring fair and even-handed administration of election laws, rejected every outcome determinative post-election lawsuit filed by the defendant and his co-conspirators and allies, providing the defendant real-time notice that his allegations were meritless.
Real time.
Okay, so then
what's the difference between a co-conspirator and an ally?
I think the allies were like they were on his side until it was time to actually act, and they're like, I don't know.
Or they were just like everyday people who were like, yeah, those people who are still flying the Trump flags, they're his allies.
The Trump one and you know what people?
Yes, but his co-conspirators were actually like on the ground. Okay, I got it.
Yeah. So the defendant widely disseminated his false claims of election fraud for months, despite the fact that he knew, and in many cases had been informed directly, that they were not true.
He was told that, but he did not believe it.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like you have to, don't you have to prove that he?
Yeah, you have to prove that he believed it and was knowingly spreading false information on purpose. And the whole time, I've said that too, the whole time. No, he really thinks this. And millions of people do too.
Right. And like when it comes to speech, if you're wrong, you're wrong. But like that's not necessarily a crime, you know? Like,
but if you're wrong, it doesn't mean that you're a liar.
Right. Like, yeah,
right?
You can be wrong and still be telling the truth as you know it.
As you know it.
As you believe it or whatever.
As the way that you experienced it. It's his lived experience.
As your lived experience.
It's his lived experience. And now they are just bringing this huge life-altering lawsuit. He's an old man. It's his lived experience. They have no idea.
What if, and maybe we can become lawyers after this, like Trump were available for your disposal, but what if he identifies as having won the 2020 presidential election?
Right. This is what I'm saying. Yes.
Yeah. You can't prove that he doesn't think that. How can they take that away
from him? They can't gatekeep the election from him like that.
No. I mean, they're just a bunch of bigots.
They're the worst kind.
They're dead electioning him. They are dead electioning him.
They are. Yeah. They are.
Yeah, you know what?
Freaking believable.
They ought to be strung up by their toes for that.
Winning election-winning gatekeepers. They're keeping the experience from him because they think that they know better.
Yeah. Right. They're truthists. That's what they are.
And bigots.
Yeah, and definitely bigoted. Definitely bigoted. Probably racist too.
I was gonna say that next.
Yeah, I mean,
racist
obviously,
for sure. Classist,
obviously, classist, ageist,
partyist.
Yeah, orangist.
No, that's the race that they're against.
I know they're a bunch of orange haters. Disseminated his false claims of election fraud for months. The defendant's knowingly false statements were integral to his criminal plans to defeat the federal government function, obstruct the certification, and interfere with others' right to vote and have their votes counted.
How can he interfere with their right to vote when it was like a month later? They already voted. Stop it.
Well, and also like he did this all in the broad view of the public through the legal system, right?
Right.
And at the end of the day,
right,
he lost, but like he it's not like he he demanded that a judge rule one way and then they actually did it. You know, he demanded that, you know,
right.
I don't know if he actually demanded, but he bitched about him all the fucking time.
He demanded that Pence do, and he didn't.
Right. And so I mean, I don't know. It seems like the only thing that they can point to as far as violent is the whole riot at the Capitol, but that's still very much undetermined what the fuck happened there.
Yeah, especially because how many feds were involved in that? That didn't just happen spontaneously.
Allegedly 100, like hundreds, like over 100 allegedly.
Yeah, that didn't just happen spontaneously. Come on.
Yeah. I know.
Let's
and don't
talk
get me
about
wrong.
Conspiracies.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Some of those like true blue Trump supporters fucking got swept up in it, and they did some stupid shit. But yeah, I don't know. So anyway,
of course they did. They're boomers. They think they're doing the right thing.
All right, so he made these knowingly false claims. throughout the post-election time period, including those below that he made immediately before the attack on the Capitol on January 6th.
Attack on the Capitol.
Yeah. A, the defendant insinuated that more than 10,000 dead voters had voted in Georgia. Just 4 days earlier, Georgia's Secretary of State had explained to the defendant that this was false. B, the defendant asserted that there had been more than 205,000, that there had been 205,000 more votes than voters in Pennsylvania. The defendant's acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general had explained to him that this was false. And C, the defendant said there had been a suspicious vote dump in Detroit, Michigan. The defendant's attorney general had explained to the defendant that this was false, and the defendant's allies in the Michigan state legislature, the Speaker of the House of Representatives and Majority Leader of the Senate, had publicly announced that there was no evidence of substantial fraud in the state.
But who did he get that information from in the first place? All three of those bullet points.
Probably from his crazy ass lawyers. Remember, he had they were gonna release the Kraken that was gonna blow this case wide open, and nothing happened. And one of the other, I think it was Lynn Wood, one of his other lawyers. He also had initially was representing Kyle Rittenhouse and let that kid rot in jail for 80 days while he was fundraising on his coattails and didn't do a goddamn thing for him. And this is one of Trump's main lawyers during the time. So,
right.
Is it a crime to have bad legal counsel? I mean, I don't know.
That's a good question.
The defendant claimed that there had been tens of thousands of double votes and other fraud in Nevada. The Nevada Secretary of State had previously rebutted the defendant's fraud claims by publicly posting a facts versus myth document explaining that Nevada judges had reviewed and rejected them, and the Nevada Supreme Court had rendered a decision denying such claims.
Okay.
The defendant said that more than 30,000 non-citizens had voted in Arizona. The defendant's own campaign manager had explained to him that such claims were false, and the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives, who had supported the defendant in the election, had issued a public statement that there was no evidence of substantial fraud in Arizona.
Okay, so all of these statements are criminal activity?
No, this is they're just trying to pound home the point that he knew all of his allegations were false. And well, I mean, it kind of what the definition of is,
right.
Did he, you could tell him all you want. There's people you can tell shit till you're blue in the face and they still don't believe you.
You should meet my husband. Exactly. I know.
Okay. So then the defendant asserted that voting machines in various contested states had switched votes from the defendant to Biden. The defendant's attorney general, acting attorney general, and acting deputy attorney general all had explained to him that this was false. And numerous recounts and audits had confirmed the accuracy of voting machines. Okay, well, so he didn't believe the accuracy of the voting machines even after they told him they were accurate.
But do you blame him? I mean, it's like the little kid who's got chocolate all over their face, and the mom's like, "Have you been eating chocolate?" And they're like, "No."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm just taking your word for it. Let's do some investigating here.
Right.
I haven't been eating chocolate.
The criminal agreements and acts to affect the object of the conspiracy. The defendant's use of deceit to get state officials to subvert the legitimate election results and change electoral votes. Shortly after Election Day, which fell on November 3rd, 2020, the defendant launched his criminal scheme. He's scheming all over the place.
Oh my gosh.
On November 13th, the defendant's campaign attorneys conceded in court that he had lost the vote count in the state of Arizona, meaning based on the assessment of the defendant's campaign advisors, had given him just a week earlier, the defendant had lost the election. So the next day, the defendant turned to co-conspirator 1, whom he announced would spearhead his efforts going forward to challenge the election results. That must be Giuliani. I don't know. I kind of tuned out of that whole thing when it was going on.
That's who we said was co-conspirator number 1 in the first place, didn't we?
Yeah. I remember making fun of a lot of the stuff, but like people were so fucking ramped up. I don't think Trump was any different than like your dad or most other regular Trump voters. Like they just didn't believe shit. I mean, they believed a lot of shit, but a lot of it,
but they didn't
like none of the official
left.
word coming out. They did not believe anything. And
no,
like,
but you know what?
That's not a crime.
How many people did you meet like that?
A lot.
Yeah, more than who did. I mean, I met more people. I know more people who are on the same lines as Trump than not.
Right. Well, and even me, like I don't believe the voting numbers were ever changed. I don't believe that. And I never, like, I was open to the idea. And then like the more we realize, or more like shit has come out, I realized like, no, they stole it from him in different ways. And so I absolutely think the election was stolen from him, but all had to do with the narrative beforehand. Like they suppressed the Hunter Biden story. Yeah. They suppressed a whole bunch of which honestly, at the end of the day, I don't know it would have mattered any of the COVID stuff because Trump was just as bad as the rest of them on COVID.
Well, look at all that. What about the Time Magazine article? That March 4th, 21 Time Magazine article. They said, this is all the stuff we did.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And none of it was illegal. Well, like, and going back to like the BLM riots, when they made up this whole story, and you know there was a bunch of generals and shit that condemned him because the story was he had removed a bunch of rioters from this deal, so in front of the church, so he could get a photo op.
Right.
But that wasn't the case at all. I don't remember the exact story of it, but like the story that we were told by the media was complete bullshit.
Of course it was.
Just like most of the stuff they said about him. Like what I don't get was that guy was bad enough on his own. Why did they have to make shit up?
Right. Exactly. Because
they can't get him on the stuff that's easy because then they're implicated as well.
They're lower than worse.
Yeah. Let's see. From that point on, so the next day, challenged. All right. From that point on, the defendant and his co-conspirators executed a strategy to use knowing deceit in the targeted states to impair, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function, including as described below. Arizona, on November 13th, 2020, the defendant had a conversation with his campaign manager, who informed him that a claim had been circulating that a substantial number of non-citizens had voted in Arizona was false. On November 22nd,
that a claim that had been circulated. On November 13, 2020, the defendant had a conversation with his campaign manager, who informed him that a claim that had been circulating that a substantial number of non-citizens had voted was false. Okay.
On November 22nd, 8 days before Arizona's governor certified the ascertainment of the state's legitimate electors, based on the popular vote, the defendant and co-conspirator 1 called the Speaker of Arizona House of Representatives and made knowingly false claims of election fraud aimed at interfering with the ascertainment of and voting by Arizona's electors as follows. There's a bunch there too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so the defendant
knowingly false.
Yeah,
that pisses me off.
Yeah, that's what they're gonna have to.
How are they gonna prove that?
Well, I guess I don't know. I mean, I guess they have to prove that they were right, but like, you can call him crazy, but I think he truly believed it. So
I do too. But why did he believe it? He had been in there for 4 years. He knew.
yeah, he knew some bullshit was up.
Yeah.
He was just he was too much of a boomer to realize where they got him.
Right.
And by the way, it was his own fucking FBI and DOJ and Department of Homeland Security and NSA that did it too.
Right.
So they falsely asserted, among other things, that a substantial number of non-citizens, non-residents, and dead people had voted fraudulently in Arizona.
How could they vote fraudulently? They're dead. Just voted.
Yeah.
Just be.
The Arizona House Speaker asked co-conspirator 1 for evidence of the claims, which co-conspirator 1 did not have, but claimed he would provide. Co-conspirator 1 never did so. B. Defendant and co-conspirator 1 asked the Arizona House Speaker to call the legislature into session to hold a hearing based on their claims of election. A hearing based on their claims of election fraud. The Arizona House Speaker refused, stating that doing so would require a two-thirds vote of its members, and he would not allow it without actual evidence of fraud.
Okay.
The defendant and co-conspirator 1 asked the Arizona House Speaker to use the legislature to circumvent the process by which legitimate electors would be ascertained for Biden based on the popular vote, and replace those electors with a new slate for the defendant. The House Speaker refused, responding that the suggestion was beyond anything he had ever heard or thought of as something within his authority.
Huh.
Okay, so he made requests or demands or whatever, but
that got denied.
Yeah.
Okay.
Huh. Okay. So, like, was he right? I don't think so, but is it a crime? I'm not convinced. If I was a member of the jury here, I would not be convinced by any of this.
No, they're not going to pick you now.
I know. Well, I'm not in DC, so.
Where did you get this paper anyway?
This is the actual document filed by the DOJ.
I know, but where did you find it?
It was off a Drudge, but it was linked right to a government website. So
yeah, Drudge. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. On December 1, co-conspirator 1 met with the Arizona House Speaker. When the Arizona House Speaker again asked co-conspirator 1 for evidence of the outcome determinative election fraud he and the defendant had been claiming, co-conspirator 1 responded with words to the effect of, "We don't have the evidence, but we have lots of theories."
Well, you got to start somewhere.
Right.
Okay, what's next?
So, I mean, they're not admitting defeat, but they're just saying we don't have anything yet.
Right.
Okay. I mean, that's...
no, this was his statement.
Isn't that like the state of life that all the anti-Trump people have been living in since 2016? Is like, we don't have anything yet, but we know he did it.
Yeah. And they're still trying.
So on December 4th, the Arizona House Speaker issued a public statement that said, in part, no election is perfect. If there were evidence of illegal votes or an improper count, then Arizona law provides a process to contest the election, a lawsuit under state law. But the law does not authorize the legislature to reverse the results of an election. As a conservative Republican, I don't like the results of the presidential election. I voted for President Trump and worked hard to reelect him. But I cannot and will not entertain a suggestion that we violate current law to change the outcome of a certified election. I and my fellow legislators swore an oath to support the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution and the laws of the state of Arizona. It would violate that oath, the basic principles of Republican government. That's little r Republican, not Republican Party, but
right.
And the rule of law if we attempted to nullify the people's vote based on unsupported theories of fraud. Under the laws that we wrote and voted upon, Arizona voters chose who wins, and our system requires that their choice be respected. So it sounds like the Speaker of the House of Arizona was a pretty upright guy.
Right.
And he politely told Donald Trump to fuck off. Like, very politely.
Well, yeah. He told him, sorry, yeah. But I can't. I got nothing.
Yeah.
I want to. I'd like to.
On the morning of January 4th, 2021, co-conspirator 2 called the Arizona House Speaker to urge him to use a majority of the legislature to decertify the state's legitimate electors. Arizona's validly ascertained electors had voted 3 weeks earlier and sent their votes to Congress, which was scheduled to count those votes in Biden's favor just 2 days time at the January 6th certification proceeding. When the Arizona House Speaker explained that state investigations had uncovered no evidence of substantial fraud in the state, co-conspirator 2 conceded.
It doesn't say no evidence of fraud. It just says substantial fraud.
Well, that's been their legal argument the whole time. The media will say there's been no fraud to speak of, but like the legal arguments that they've been using against Trump has been like no election altering or whatever, substantial.
Not enough to swing it in his favor.
Yeah. Co-conspirator 2 conceded that he didn't know enough about facts on the ground in Arizona, but nonetheless told the Arizona House Speaker to decertify and let the courts sort it out. The Arizona House Speaker refused, stating that he would not play with the oath he had taken to uphold the United States Constitution and Arizona law.
Huh.
So once again, the House Speaker wasn't going to be bullied. So good for him.
Right.
On January 6th, the defendant publicly repeated the knowingly false claim that 36,000 non-citizens had voted in Arizona. Okay, so Georgia. What page are we on? We're only on page 11. That's like 45 pages.
Well, I know. Well, you don't have to read it word for word. You could skip it.
No.
No, you can't.
Co-conspirator 3 responded 9 minutes. Okay, so this November 16th, 2020, on the defendant's behalf, his executive assistant sent co-conspirator 3 and others a document containing bullet points critical of a certain voting machine company, writing
certain machine company whose name will not name yet.
Yeah. Writing, see attached, please include as is or almost as is in lawsuit. So there's an attachment there. Co-conspirator 3 responded 9 minutes later, writing, it must go in all suits in Georgia and PA, or GA and PA immediately, so that's Georgia and Pennsylvania, with a fraud claim that requires the entire election to be set aside in those states and machines impounded for nonpartisan professional inspection. But that didn't happen, and
right.
So you can say anything you want, but
right,
nothing happened. So
right.
Okay. So on November 25th, co-conspirator 3 filed a lawsuit against the governor of Georgia, falsely alleging massive election fraud accomplished through the voting machine company's election software and hardware. Before the lawsuit was even filed, the defendant retweeted a post promoting it. The defendant did this despite the fact that when he had discussed co-conspirators 3's far-fetched public claims regarding the voting machine company,
far-fetched,
in private with his advisors, the defendant had conceded that they were unsupported and that co-conspirator 3 sounded crazy. Co-conspirator 3's Georgia lawsuit was dismissed on December 7th. So that had to have been like Lynn Wood or Sidney Powell that they're talking about there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So that one maybe, because he said they sounded crazy. So he's at least acknowledging that they're maybe not be on the up and up. Yeah. So maybe they got something there. I don't know. We'll see. On December 3rd, co-conspirator 1 orchestrated a presentation to a judiciary subcommittee of the Georgia State Senate with the intention of misleading state senators into blocking ascertainment of legitimate electors.
Keep talking.
During the presentation, an agent of the defendant and co-conspirator 1 falsely claimed that more than 10,000 dead people voted in Georgia. That afternoon, a senior advisor to the defendant told the defendant's chief of staff through text message.
Dead people are voting.
Just an FYI, a campaign lawyer that's been redacted and his team certified that the 10K plus supposed dead voting in Georgia is not accurate. It was alleged in co-conspirator 1's hearing today. The senior advisor clarified that he believed the actual number was 12. So there were 12 dead people voted, not 10,000.
Not 10,000? 12
Yeah.
or 12,000?
No, 12.
1,000?
12.
I'm pretty sure the actual number of dead people is 12, so I'm not saying it didn't happen. Well, at
Another
least
agent of the defendant and co-conspirator 1 played a misleading excerpt of a video recording of ballot counting at State Farm Arena in Atlanta and insinuated that it showed election workers counting suitcases of illegal ballots. Millions of them. Millions.
We watched them.
Co-conspirator 2 encouraged legislators to decertify the state's legitimate electors based on false allegations of election fraud. But they didn't. So
I know. So they're. I keep going.
Also on December 3rd, the defendant issued a tweet amplifying the knowingly false claims made in co-conspirator 1's presentation in Georgia. Wow. Blockbuster testimony taking place right now in Georgia. Ballot stuffing by Dems when Republicans were forced to leave the large counting room. Plenty more coming, but this alone leads to an easy win of the state. Well, he was wrong.
But yeah. And then they kicked him off of the Twitter.
Yeah,
now it's known as X, so they better get their stuff together.
I know. But was that criminal? I don't see how. On December 4th, the Georgia Secretary of State's chief operating officer debunked the claims made at co-conspirator 1's presentation the previous day, issuing a tweet stating the 90-second video of election workers at State Farm Arena purporting to show fraud was watched in its entirety hours by Georgia Secretary of State investigators. Shows normal ballot processing. Here is the fact check on it. On December 7th, he reiterated during a press conference that the claim there had been misconduct at State Farm Arena was false. On December 8th, the defendant called the Georgia Attorney General to pressure him to support an election lawsuit filed in the Supreme Court by another state's Attorney General. The Georgia Attorney General told the defendant that officials had investigated various claims of election fraud in the state and were not seeing evidence to support them.
Where's the quote on that?
There was no quote.
No.
Yeah, and so that's the big allegedly the smoking gun phone call is to I think it was the Attorney General, maybe it was Secretary of State. But either way, he talked like a mob boss, and he was like, something might happen. I don't know what. He's not really threatening you, but he is,
No, say it in your Donald Trump voice.
Oh, let's see. That was my mobster voice, but
kind of.
You never know.
With your Italian voice.
You never know when a toilet might clog, if you know what I mean. You never know. Things might happen. It could get messy. I don't want that to happen. Nobody wants that to happen. My wife said, "Do you want that to happen?" I said, "No way. I don't want it to happen. That'd be terrible." But it could. Nobody knows what will happen.
That's more like it.
The Georgia Attorney General
Senior campaign advisor informed the defendant that his claims of a large number of dead voters in Georgia were untrue. We believe that number's actually 32.
Where'd you see? Could not be sent down. False claim with respect to the persistent false claims regarding State Farm Arena on December 8th. The senior campaign advisor wrote in an email with when our research and campaign legal team can't back up any of the claims made by our elite strike force legal team, you can see why we're 0-32 on our cases. I'll obviously hustle to help on all fronts, but it's tough to own any of this when it's all just conspiracy shit beamed down from the mothership.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Senior campaign advisor.
Oh, I wonder who that is. You should interview them.
I wonder if that's like Mark Meadows or something. Who spoke with the defendant on a daily basis. Huh. It's tough to own any of this when it's all just conspiracy shit beamed down from the mothership.
Ay, pobrecitos.
On December 10th, 4 days before Biden's validly ascertained electors were scheduled.
Alleged.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to
scheduled-
say allegedly.
Scheduled to cast votes and send them to Congress. Co-conspirator 1 appeared at a hearing before the Georgia House of Representatives Government Affairs Committee. Co-conspirator 1 played the State Farm Arena video again and falsely showed voter fraud right in front of the people's eyes, and was the tip of the iceberg.
Was this when the sweat was coming down Rudy Giuliani's face?
I think it might have been.
Smearing his makeup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was like dripping hair dye and
mascara or something.
Yeah. You know, he's an old Italian man. Come on.
I know.
You got the agita. Then he cited 2 election workers by name. Oh yeah, so this is definitely Rudy because he had to admit these were false claims.
Right.
So he baselessly accused them of quite obviously surreptitiously passing around.
You can do it.
Yeah. Quite obviously surreptitiously passing around USB ports as if they were vials of heroin or cocaine, and suggested that they were criminals whose places of work, their homes should have been searched for evidence of ballots, for evidence of USB ports, for evidence of voter fraud.
UFOs. Oh, what?
Yeah. Thereafter, the 2 election workers received numerous death threats.
But did they die?
But did they die? I do feel bad for those 2 ladies because they're just like, man, I'm out here doing my civic duty.
They're probably volunteers who were $10 an hour, like we did when we.
I know. That is such a shit job.
It was awesome.
I'm glad you liked it. I hated it.
Yeah.
On December 15th, the defendant summoned the incoming acting attorney general, the incoming acting deputy attorney general, and others to the Oval Office to discuss allegations of election fraud. During the meeting, the Justice Department officials specifically refuted the defendant's claims about State Farm Arena, explaining to him that the activity shown on the tape co-conspirator 1 had used was benign. On December 23rd, a day after the defendant's chief of staff personally observed the signature verification process at the Cobb County Civic Center and notified the defendant that state election officials were conducting themselves in an exemplary fashion. Would find fraud if it existed. The defendant tweeted that Georgia officials administering the signature verification process were trying to hide evidence of election fraud and were terrible people.
No, say it the right way. Terrible people.
Terrible people. They're the worst. Nobody likes them. Everyone agrees.
Everyone knows they're the worst.
I called up Rudy and I said, "Can you believe it? Look at these people. They're so terrible." And he said, "I know. So terrible.
Terrible.
What are we gonna do? In a phone call on December 27th, the defendant spoke with the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general. During the call, the defendant again pressed the unfounded claims regarding State Farm Arena, and the two top Justice Department officials again rebutted the allegations, telling him that the Justice Department had reviewed videotape and interviewed witnesses and had not identified any suspicious conduct.
Oh, I find that so hard to believe.
Yeah. On December 31st, the defendant signed a verification affirming false election fraud allegations made on his behalf in a lawsuit filed in his name against the Georgia governor. In advance of the filing, co-conspirator 2, who was advising the defendant on the lawsuit, acknowledged in an email that he and the defendant had, since signing a previous verification, been made aware that some of the allegations and evidence proffered by the experts had been inaccurate, and that signing a new affirmation with that knowledge and incorporation reference would not be accurate. The defendant and co-conspirator 2 caused the defendant's signed verification to be filed nonetheless. So he had shitty legal counsel once again.
Again, right.
On January 2nd, 4 days before Congress's certification proceeding, the defendant and others called Georgia's Secretary of State. During the call, this is the smoking gun one, I guess.
Oh, right. Here we go.
The defendant lied to the Secretary of State to induce him to alter Georgia's popular vote and call into question the validity of the Biden electors' votes, which had been transmitted to Congress weeks before, including as follows. The defendant raised allegations regarding the State Farm Arena's arena video and repeatedly disparaged one of the same election workers that co-conspirator 1 had maligned on December 10th, using her name almost 20 times and falsely referring to her as a professional vote scammer and hustler.
What's her name?
It was a black lady. That's all.
What's her name?
I can't remember her name.
You know she is. That's her like tagline on her Insta: professional vote scammer and hustler. She that's legit.
In response, the Georgia Secretary of State refuted this. You're talking about the State Farm video, and I think it's extremely unfortunate that co-conspirator 1 or his people, they sliced and diced that video and took it out of context. When the Georgia Secretary of State then offered a... Oh, no, she is a vote hustler, but that's not who we're talking about.
Isn't that who it is in Georgia?
No, this was like a normal, volunteer lady.
A normal lady.
I think she kind of looked like Stacey Abrams, if I remember right, but I'm gonna feel like a real jackass if she was like a skinny white lady. I compared her to Stacey Abrams. I mean, for that matter, I'll be embarrassed if she was a skinny black lady. I don't. Stacey Abrams is a terrible person, so I feel bad.
Exactly, that's who I think it is.
No, this was like a regular lady.
Really?
It was like if Deb had been born in Georgia, just one of those type. Yeah, I think she was just like a volunteer.
Yeah.
Election worker that I probably was she a Democrat? What's that?
Isn't she in Georgia?
Yes, but she was running for governor. She wasn't she's not gonna degrade herself by actually volunteer for election. She's just gonna bitch about the elections.
Right. Okay. I'm with you.
When the Georgia Secretary of State then offered a link to a video that would disprove co-conspirator 1's claims, the defendant responded, "I don't care about a link. I don't need it. I have a much Raffensperger. I have a much better link." The defendant asked about rumors that paper ballots cast in the election were being destroyed, and the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel explained to him that claim had been investigated and was not true. Those are all Republican officials, by the way.
Oh,
in
really?
Georgia. In Georgia, yeah.
Okay.
The only elections, like major elections that the Republicans lost in Georgia were the Senate when Trump told them not to
Oh,
go out and vote because it was rigged
yep.
anyways.
Right.
Yeah, so they went from 2 Republican senators in Georgia to none.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
They done good.
The defendant claimed that 5,000 dead people voted in Georgia, causing the Georgia Secretary of State to respond, "Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong. The actual number were 2. 2. 2 people were dead that 2 people that were dead that voted. And so your information's wrong. That was 2."
So you're saying there's a chance.
There's a chance.
I mean, still. 2 dead people still voted. And would they have even noticed if Trump hadn't been like, I know 5,000 dead people voted in Georgia? And they've been like, go look.
The defendant claimed that thousands of out-of-state voters had cast ballots in Georgia's election, which the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel refuted, explaining, "We've been going through each of those as well, and those numbers that we got that Giuliani was just saying, they're not accurate. Everyone we've been through are people that lived in Georgia, moved to a different state, but then moved back to Georgia legitimately. They moved back in. They moved back in years ago. This was not like something just before the election." In response to multiple other of the defendant's allegations, the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel told the defendant that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was examining all such claims and finding no merit to them. The defendant said that he needed to find 11,780 votes and insinuated that the Georgia Secretary of State and his counsel could be subject to criminal prosecution if they failed to find election fraud as he demanded, stating, quote, "And you're going to find that they are, which is totally illegal. It's more illegal for you than it is for them because you know what they did and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal, that's a criminal offense." And
you
I
gotta
gotta
read
go
it
back.
in voice.
I was getting ready to say. "And you're gonna find that they are, which is totally illegal. It's more illegal for you than it is for them because you know what they did and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal. That's a criminal offense, and you can't let that happen. That's a big risk to you, and blah blah blah. You're a lawyer."
That's right. Yes.
The next day, on January 3rd, the defendant falsely claimed that Georgia's Secretary of State had not addressed the defendant's allegations, publicly stating that the Georgia Secretary of State was unwilling or unable to answer questions such as ballots under table scam, ballot destruction, out-of-state voters, dead voters, and more. He has no clue. On January 6th, the defendant publicly repeated the knowingly false insinuation that more than 10,300 dead people had voted in Georgia. He just keeps jumping around with his numbers. That's how you know
that's
he just believes it.
Where did these numbers come from?
I don't think he cares. He just spouts out numbers because he just knows it's true. Just whatever that number is. That's he just said whatever, 10,300.
Oh, it's like Biden.
A lot of dead people, a lot of stiffs really wanting to vote.
It's like Biden. What did he say the other day? The gas prices have gone down like 2 inches.
Well, he also said we've ended cancer as we know it. Really?
Oh, geez.
Really?
Okay.
Have we cured cancer finally? It seems like probably not.
Exactly.
Michigan. On November 5th, 2020, the defendant claimed there had been a suspicious dump of votes, purportedly illegitimate ballots, stating, "In Detroit, there were hours of unexplained delay in delivering many of the votes for counting. The final batch did not arrive until 4 a.m. even though the polls closed at 8 o'clock, so they brought it in and the batches came in and nobody knows where they came from. Total disgrace. That's not it. Not in the quote.
No, that's
but,
not in the book. It's the end quote. There you go.
Total disgrace. On November 20th, 3 days before the Michigan's governor signed a certificate of ascertainment notifying the federal government that based on the popular vote, Biden's electors were to represent Michigan's voters. The defendant held a meeting in the Oval Office with the Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives and the Majority Leader of the Michigan Senate. In the meeting, the defendant raised his false claim, among others, of an illegitimate vote dump in Detroit. In response, the Michigan Senate Majority Leader told the defendant that he had lost Michigan not because of fraud, but because the defendant had underperformed with certain voter populations in the state. Upon leaving the meeting, the Michigan House Speaker and Michigan Senate Majority Leader issued a statement reiterating this. Quote, the Senate and House Oversight Committees are actively engaged in a thorough review of Michigan's election process, and we have faith in the committee process to provide greater transparency and accountability to our citizens. We have not yet been made aware of any information that would change the outcome of the election in Michigan, and as legislative leaders, we will follow the law and follow the normal process regarding Michigan's electors, just as we have said throughout this election. Yeah. On December 1, the defendant raised his Michigan vote dump claim with the Attorney General, who responded that what had occurred in Michigan had been the normal vote counting process and there was no indication of fraud in Detroit.
That's our normal vote dumping process. What are you talking about?
Despite this, the next day, I gotta wet the pipes for this baby.
Okay.
Despite this, the next day, the defendant made a knowingly false statement that in Michigan, quote, at 6:31 in the morning, a vote dump of 149,772 votes came in unexpectedly. We were winning by a lot. The batch was received in horror. Nobody knows anything about it. It's corrupt. Detroit is corrupt. I have a lot of friends in Detroit. They know it, but Detroit is totally corrupt. End quote.
That's why my friends all live there. Because they're all corrupt.
You wanna read that part starting on December 4th?
On December 4th, co-conspirator 1 sent a text message to the Michigan House Speaker reiterating his unsupported claim of election fraud and attempting to get the Michigan House Speaker to assist in reversing the ascertainment of the legitimate Biden electors, stating, "Looks like Georgia..." Oh no, this is not the right guy. It's co-conspirator 1. Looks like Georgia may well hold some factual hearings and change the certification.
Do it in a James Gandolfini voice, because that's Giuliani.
I know. I was trying to think, what does Giuliani sound like? Oh, where'd you go?
Let's see. So I need you to pass a joint resolution from the Michigan legislature that states, the
no,
election
you were
has
in
been
the
disputed.
wrong verse. Go back up.
Damn it.
You moved me. Under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution, as co-conspirator 2, explain that don't just have the right to do it, but the obligation. Help me get this done in Michigan.
Gabagoo.
Yeah. Similarly, on December 7th, despite still having established no fraud in Michigan, co-conspirator 1 sent a text intended for the Michigan State Senate. Michigan Senate Majority Leader. So I need you to pass a joint resolution from the Michigan legislature that states that the election is in dispute. And I can't see the rest of it because my picture's in the way. There's an ongoing investigation by the legislature, and the electors stamped by Governor Whitmer are not the official electors of the state of Michigan. Don't fall within the safe harbor deadline of December 8th under the Michigan law. It's your turn.
On December 14th, the day that electors in states across the country were required to vote and submit their votes to Congress, The Michigan House Speaker and Michigan Senate Majority Leader announced that, contrary to the defendant's requests, they would not decertify the legitimate election results or electors in Michigan. The Michigan Senate Majority Leader's public statement included, quote, "We have not received evidence of fraud on a scale that would change the outcome of the election in Michigan."
I mean, we got some fraud, but like not enough.
Not enough.
So again, you're saying there's a chance.
The Michigan House Speaker's public statement read, in part, quote, "We've diligently examined these reports of fraud to the best of our ability. I fought hard for President Trump. Nobody wanted him to win more than me. I think he's done an incredible job, but I love our republic too. I can't fathom risking our norms, traditions, and institutions
Same
to
thing,
pass,
Arizona.
to pass a resolution retroactively changing the electors for Trump, simply because some think there may have been enough widespread fraud to give him the win. That's as unprecedented for good reason. And that's why there is not enough support in the House to cast a new slate of electors. I fear we'd lose our country forever. This would truly bring mutually assured destruction for every future election in regards to the Electoral College. And I can't stand for that. I won't."
What?
On January 6, 2021, the defendant publicly repeated his knowingly false claim regarding an illicit dump of more than 100,000 ballots in Detroit.
The part that I hate the most about this, again, is that they put in there false. They could just say that he repeated his claim about an illegal, knowingly false. That knowingly false part just pisses me off. No, you're putting your own bias in there.
Like, we didn't know the Arizona shit was nonsense till like a year later, when the team that Trump's people hired to do the audit came out, said there wasn't anything, and they refused to like release any of their like findings, you know?
Right.
And but yeah, at that point, I mean, they can say what they want, but yeah, I don't know. He's a stubborn ass old man. That's
right.
That's what I'm picking up on so far.
And that's how he got like that.
Well, and his legal counsel was fucking stupid. Like that's more than anything. That's what I'm picking up, is his legal counsel was retarded. All right, so Pennsylvania, on November 11th, 2020, the defendant publicly maligned a Philadelphia city commissioner for stating on the news that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in Philadelphia. As a result, the Philadelphia city commissioner and his family received death threats. But were they real death threats, or was it just like, some bullshit on Twitter? Like, was there actual action taken towards them, or was it just some idiot on Twitter is like, "I'm going to kill you and your family"? And
yeah, that's what a death threat is.
And then, yeah, but like, was it an actual threat, or was it just shit talking? You know.
Well.
Let's see. On November 25th, the day after, Pennsylvania's governor signed a certificate of ascertainment and thus certified to the federal government that Biden's electors were the legitimate electors for the state. Co-conspirator 1 orchestrated an event at a hotel in Gettysburg, attended by state legislators. I think maybe this is when his hair was all
melting.
Yeah, maybe it was later than that. I don't know. That whole timeline's fuzzy for me. Co-conspirator 1 falsely claimed that Pennsylvania had issued 1.8 million absentee ballots and received 2.5 million in return. In the days thereafter, a campaign staffer wrote internally that co-conspirator 1's allegation was just wrong and there's no way to defend it. Once again, shitty legal counsel. The deputy campaign manager responded, "We've been saying this for a while. It's very frustrating." On December 4th, after 4 Republican leaders of the Pennsylvania legislature issued a public statement that the General Assembly lacked the authority to overturn the popular vote and appoint its own slate of electors, and that doing so would violate the state election code and constitution. The defendant retweeted a post labeling the legislators cowards. Of course he did. He's a boomer.
I really love how much schooling on the Constitution we got.
I know.
During this, that was good.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I think this is worthwhile podcast. So,
well, yes, but I mean during when all this was happening in real life.
I know.
How much we looked up stuff a lot. We were like, well, how come? What did they say?
I know. I did a whole episode on the certain elections that were decided by the House of Representatives and not the Electoral College, and one of them being John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson. You know, like the second election.
Right.
Yeah. So like we learned a whole bunch, a bunch of stuff that I didn't know before, and
right. Well, because we've never had to see it in action, so
I know. And honestly, like all of this shit went through the legal channels and was shot down. Right. So, like that's not a crime. As far as I can tell.
They're gonna finally get to the crime part where he led the charge.
Right. All right. So on December 31st and January 3rd, the defendant repeatedly raised with the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general the allegation that in Pennsylvania there had been 205,000 more votes than voters. Each time the Justice Department officials informed the defendant that his claims were false. On January 6, 2021, the defendant publicly repeated his knowingly false claim that there had been 205,000 more votes than voters in Pennsylvania. Wisconsin, on November 29th, 2020, a recount in Wisconsin that the defendant's campaign had petitioned and paid for did not change the election result and, in fact, increased the defendant's margin of defeat.
That's rough.
That one sucks. not a great one for old Trumpy Bear. On December 14th, the Wisconsin Supreme Court rejected an election challenge by the campaign. One justice wrote, quote, "Nothing in this case casts any legitimate doubt that the people of Wisconsin lawfully chose the Vice President Biden and Senator Harris to be the next leaders of our great country," end quote. On December 21st, as a result of the state Supreme Court's decision, the Wisconsin governor, who had signed a certificate of ascertainment on November 30th, identifying Biden's electors as the state's legitimate electors, signed a certificate of final determination in which he recognized the state Supreme Court had resolved the controversy regarding the appointment of Biden's electors and confirmed that Biden had received the highest number of votes in the state and that his electors were the state's legitimate electors.
But wasn't she the crazy lady?
No, that was Michigan, the one that allegedly was gonna get kidnapped. Except 3/4 of the people involved were feds.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That was
Michigan. You remember when they arrested those people out of Garden City for allegedly trying to bomb the mosque?
Yes.
I wonder how many people in that group were feds.
Yeah, now that you mention it.
I mean, we know that area pretty well. We know a lot of people. Right. And outside of the bitching about how how different the Somalians were, kind of weird, is usually the words that were used.
They were smelly.
Yeah, but outside of that, like there wasn't any threat of violence against them.
No,
ever.
Nobody wanted to bomb them.
I know, and so that one came out of nowhere, and then I kind of bought into it, and then when this Michigan deal came out, that that thing was a whole bunch of feds, and probably wouldn't have happened if they hadn't pressed the people. I'm like, I wonder how many feds were involved in that whole Garden City thing.
Well, what'd they get out of it?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that one again because I remember when it happened, but I don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll come back to that some other time.
Oh,
but,
okay.
let's see. The same day, in response to the court decision that had prompted the Wisconsin governor to sign a certificate of final determination, the defendant issued a tweet repeating his knowingly false claim of election fraud and demanding that the Wisconsin legislature overturn the election results that led to the ascertainment of Biden's electors as the legitimate electors. On December 27th, the defendant raised with the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general a specific fraud claim that there had been more votes than voters in Wisconsin. The acting deputy attorney general informed the defendant that the claim was false.
False.
Yeah. On January 6, 2021, the defendant publicly repeated knowingly false claims that there had been tens of thousands of unlawful votes in Wisconsin. Once again, that was at a rally, at a protest, and he's still the sitting president of the United States, and he's
right.
So he's an elected official who have far more like lenient First Amendment protections than the average citizen because it's protected political speech, you know.
Especially Trump.
So even if he knew they were false and he repeated them, like that's still his right to do so under the First Amendment.
Right. I agree.
And you know, politicians lie publicly all the fucking time.
All the time.
All the time. All the time.
Right.
It's
their job.
Okay. So the defendant's use of dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to organize fraudulent slates of electors and cause them to transmit false certificates to Congress. As the defendant's attempt to obstruct the electoral vote through deceit of state officials met with repeated failure, beginning in early December 2020, he and co-conspirators developed a new plan to marshal individuals who had served as the defendant's electors had he won the popular vote in 7 targeted states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and cause those individuals to make and send to the vice president and Congress false certification that they were the legitimate electors. Under the plan, I guess that would be an act of fraud, but I mean, like, so say you're a 18-year-old kid with a fake ID, and they catch you with a fake ID. Like, you get like a little larger fine and a little longer probation, but like typically you're not going to jail for that shit. And that's kind of along the same thing. Like it's like a forgery, but like it didn't work though, you know? So
would he be if it did work, you think he should be charged harder?
I don't know. I think you should be charged either way. Like that one, I guess that one kind of makes sense. Even though it didn't work, he did pressure them to. I mean, I still don't. I guess I don't know the law enough to really.
Right. A fake controversy.
Well, and he convinced them to go ahead and send their results in to Mike Pence, which I'm guessing it was bearing some sort of seal of the state that they were from.
Maybe, yeah.
And which that would be falsifying, you know, public, you know, state documents. But
yeah.
And if he maybe,
but then
maybe,
he didn't
but
do
even
it.
so, that would be
whoever did it, they did it.
I guess what would make it a federal crime is he sent it to the Congress and he sent it to the vice president. Had they just done it on their, or just kept it within their state, but then if they kept it in their state, there would have been. It wouldn't have made a difference at the federal level. So I mean, maybe if they can prove it. And I mean, I think that part's actually pretty well known that he did recruit these people.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, it seems pretty ticky tacky to me, but
I know.
they're this is our tax dollars hard at work here, you know.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Let's see. Under the plan, the submission of these fraudulent slates would create a fake controversy as the certification proceeding certification proceeding and position the vice president presiding on January 6th, the president of the Senate, to supplant the legitimate electors with the defendant's fake electors and certify the defendant as president.
That's the part that's the most corny to me.
Yeah, I don't know how.
I mean, because the legit electors would know they were legit and that something was wrong and they would say something. It's like whoever gets there the fastest, whoever's the quickest is the winner. That's not how it works.
Well, and also kind of it goes to the blind following of your leaders. Like all these people that went ahead and went along with it are like,
right.
You guys had to know this was bullshit beforehand.
Right. And then the people who were the legit electors, they knew they were legit. They were going to speak up. They weren't going to be, oh, okay, never mind.
And you know, like most of the craziest people that went along with this election nonsense got voted out the next term. Like in pretty large numbers. You know, our Secretary of State got voted out. Pennsylvania lost the governor because their guy was super super election dude. And I don't know, it seems like the price has already been paid. You know, I don't know. I was talking with Doug today, and I said, you know, it can't be any middle ground. You have to prosecute them all or prosecute none.
Prosecute them none. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't selectively prosecute. You have to. It's all or none. And yeah, I don't know. And like we're not even delving into the Biden nonsense. This is just all rehashing of the Stop the Steal stuff. And I don't know. It's interesting. The plan capitalized on ideas presented in memoranda drafted by co-conspirator 5, an attorney who was assisting the defendant's campaign with legal efforts related to a recount in Wisconsin. The memoranda evolved over time from a legal strategy to preserve the defendant's rights to a corrupt plan to subvert the federal government function by stopping Biden electors' votes from being counted and certified as followed.
All right, so maybe this will answer my question.
Yeah. The November 18th memorandum, the Wisconsin memo, as it'll be known further in the document, advocated that because of the ongoing recount in Wisconsin, the defendants' electors there should meet and cast votes on December 14th, the date that the ECA required appointed electors to vote to preserve the alternative of the defendants' Wisconsin elector slate in the event the defendant ultimately prevailed in the state.
Okay. That seems legit though.
Yeah, I don't that seems like they're being prudent. Particularly since there was an ongoing lawsuit.
Right.
The December 6th memorandum, fraudulent elective memo, marked a sharp departure from co-conspirator 5's Wisconsin memo, advocating, so this is where it turned criminal, apparently, advocating that the alternative electors originally conceived of to preserve rights in Wisconsin instead be used in a number of states as fraudulent electors to prevent Biden from receiving the 270 electoral votes necessary to secure the presidency on January 6th. The fraudulent elector memo suggested that the defendants' electors in 6 purported contested states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, Remember how long it took to get
Yeah.
the votes here?
Yes, it was
that was
frustrating.
insane.
Yes.
Should meet and mimic as best the possible actions of the legitimate Biden electors, and that on January 6th, the vice president should open and count the fraudulent votes, setting up a fake controversy that would derail the proper certification of Biden as president elect.
But that would be a real controversy, not a fake controversy.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what happened with my camera there either.
No, what happened? What are you doing?
I switched
I
to
didn't know that was an option.
There we go. We're back. We're back,
Okay.
baby.
Well,
The December 9th memorandum, fraudulent elector instructions, consisted of co-conspirator 5's instructions on how fraudulent electors could mimic legitimate electors in Arizona,
well,
Georgia.
whoever co-conspirator 5 is the one who became involved now and is making a whole bunch of shit.
He fucked everything up, or she.
I think so, or whoever they are.
Probably a she, if we're being honest. It's probably
I doubt
a she.
it. Let's keep reading and see if they say he or she.
Co-conspirator 5.
Not that it matters. It's 2023. He could be she.
True. Co-conspirator 5 noted that in some states it would be virtually impossible for the fraudulent electors to successfully take the same steps as the legitimate electors because state law required formal participation in the process by state officials or access to official resources. The plan began in early December, and ultimately the conspirators and the defendant's campaign took the Wisconsin memo and expanded it to any state that the defendant claimed was contested, even New Mexico.
Not New Mexico.
Which the defendant had lost by more than 10% of the popular vote.
No.
This expansion was forecast by emails to the defendant's chief of staff sent on December 6th, forwarding the Wisconsin memo to campaign staff and writing, "We just need to have some coordinating on the electors for states."
Coordinating the electors for states.
Yeah, you want to read
whoever co-conspirator 5 is, once I seen their name in this whole thing, that's when I seen a lot of sketchy shit.
Shit disturber, co-conspirator 5, yeah. I say.
I agree. Because before it was like, well, let's go see. Let's go ask them. Did you have any dead voters? Okay, a couple. I mean, all of that. Co-conspirator 1, co-conspirator 2. But here's co-conspirator 5, and all of a sudden it's like, let's give everyone fake IDs. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, fraudulent passports.
Yeah. On December 6th, the defendant and co-conspirator 2 called the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee to ensure that the plan was in motion. During the call, co-conspirator 2 told the chairwoman that it was important for the RNC to help the defendant's campaign gather electors in targeted states, and falsely represented to her that such electors' votes would be used only if ongoing litigation in one of the states changed the results in the defendant's favor. Okay. After the RNC chairwoman consulted the campaign and heard that the work on gathering electors was underway, she called and reported this information to the defendant, who responded approvingly. He nodded approvingly.
Very good. Very good.
Very nice. Good work.
Keep up the good work.
Total loyalty. Never
That's
stray.
what I like.
This
is huge. Spot in my next cabinet.
This is huge. On December 7th, co-conspirator 1 received the Wisconsin memo and the fraudulent elector memo. Co-conspirator 1 spoke with co-conspirator 6 regarding attorneys who could assist in the fraudulent elector effort in the targeted states. And he received from co-conspirator 6 an email identifying attorneys in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The next day, on December 8th, co-conspirator 5 called the Arizona attorney on co-conspirator 6's list. In an email after the call, the Arizona attorney recounted his conversation with co-conspirator 5 as follows. I just talked to the gentleman who did the memo, or who did that memo. His idea is basically that all of us, Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, etc., have our electors send in their votes, even though the votes aren't legal under federal law because they're not signed by the governor. So
Right.
that, yeah, so all those electors, they can cast their vote however they want, but they're only counted if they're certified by a state official. In most of those states, it's the governor.
Right.
I think it might be in
The
all the
governor
states eventually.
or the Secretary of State.
Well, I think it's the Secretary of State that like compiles the report, and then the governor either signs off on it or they don't. But I believe it's the governor that's the final voice that that sends it up to the feds. Because they're not signed by the governor, so that members of Congress can fight about whether they should be counted on January 6th. They could potentially argue that they're not bound by federal law because they're Congress and make the law, etc. Kind of wild / creative. I'm happy to discuss. My comment to him is, I guess there's no harm in it, legally at least, i.e., we would just be sending in fake electoral votes to Pence so that someone in Congress can make an objection when they start counting votes and start arguing that the fake votes should be counted. So once again, shitty legal counsel.
Yeah, like how does that even make sense?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily agree with him. He's like, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's anything illegal about it. All we're doing is like sending this up there and making them argue about it, and you know, Congress will sort it out in the end. And so it's kind of like, I mean, it's what the boss wants to do, we'll do it, but it seems like a dumb idea.
Yeah.
Okay. At Co-Conspirator 1's direction on December 10th, Co-Conspirator 5 sent to points of contact in all targeted states except Wisconsin, which already received his memos, and New Mexico, a streamlined version of the Wisconsin memo, which did not reveal the intended fraudulent use of the defendant's electors and the fraudulent elector instructions, along with fraudulent elector certificates that he had drafted. The next day, on December 11th, through Co-Conspirator 5, Co-Conspirator 1 suggested that their Arizona lawyer file a petition for certiorari in the Supreme Court as a pretext to claim that litigation was pending in the state to provide cover for convening and voting of the defendant's fraudulent electors there. Co-Conspirator 5 explained that Co-Conspirator 1 had heard from a state official and state provisional elector that it could appear treasonous for the Arizona electors to vote Monday if there is no pending court proceeding. That's a problematic statement for old Trumpy.
Right.
I wonder if they let him know that, or if this is you know, because if they didn't tell Trump that, then like did he know better?
Right.
To manage the plan in Pennsylvania on December 12th, Co-Conspirator 1, Co-Conspirator 5, and Co-Conspirator 6 participated in a conference call organized by the defendant's campaign with the defendant's electors in the state. When the defendant's electors expressed concern about signing certificates representing themselves as legitimate electors, Co-Conspirator 1 falsely assured them that their certificates would be used only if the defendant succeeded in litigation. Subsequently, Co-Conspirator 6 circulated a proposed conditional language to that effect for potential inclusion in the fraudulent elector certificates. A campaign official cautioned not to offer the conditional language to other states because the other states are signing what he prepared. If it gets out, we change the language for PA. It could snowball. In some cases, the defendant's electors refuse to participate in the plan.
Okay.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's starting to seem like maybe there's a little bit of a case there.
Right, this is what
But-
I'm saying. Now, this part seems sketchy.
Yeah. But it also seems like it went on behind his back.
Well, again, how much? Imagine how much shit's going on behind Biden's back.
Oh, everything's going on behind Biden's back. He doesn't know where
Exactly.
the fuck he's at.
Jeez.
On
On December 13th.
on December 13th, the defendant asked the senior campaign advisor.
No, you got to read that whole thing. 62.
Okay. On December 13th, co-conspirator 5 sent co-conspirator 1 an email memorandum that further confirmed the conspirators' plan was not to use the fraudulent electors only in the circumstance that the defendant's litigation was successful in one of the targeted states. Instead, the plan was to falsely present the fraudulent slates as an alternative to the legitimate slates at Congress's certification proceedings.
That doesn't make sense. Come on.
Yeah. So was this at the direction of Trump, or was this
Yeah, co-conspirator number 5.
right? And then
Shit
Rudy
server.
going along with it because he likes the limelight. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
On December 13th, the defendant asked the senior campaign advisor for an update on what was going on with the elector plan and directed him to put out a statement on electors. As a result, co-conspirator 1 directed the senior campaign advisor to join a conference call with him, co-conspirator 6, and others. When the senior campaign advisor related these developments in text messages to the deputy campaign manager, a senior advisor to the defendant, and a campaign staffer, the deputy campaign manager responded, quote, "Here's the thing. The way this has morphed, it's a crazy place, so I don't know who wants to put their names on it."
Right?
The senior advisor wrote, quote, "certifying illegal votes," end quote. In turn, the participants in the group text message refused to have a statement regarding electors attributed to their names because none of them could stand by it. Could, quote, stand by it.
Unquote.
Unquote. Also on December 13th, at a campaign staffer's request, co-conspirator 5 drafted and sent fraudulent elector certificates for the defendant's electors in New Mexico, which had not previously been among the targeted states, and there was no pending litigation on the defendant's behalf. The next day, the defendant's campaign filed an election challenge suit in New Mexico at 11:54 a.m., 6 minutes before the noon deadline for the electors' votes, as a pretext so that there was pending litigation there at the time the fraudulent electors voted. So they covered their ass, right?
Yeah, they did.
Isn't that what that's what I'm gathering.
Yep.
Yeah.
That seems conspiratorial.
Yeah.
Yep.
On December 14th, the legitimate electors of all 50 states and the District of Columbia met in their respective jurisdictions to formally cast their votes for president, resulting in a total of 232 electoral votes for the defendant and 306 for Biden. The legitimate electoral votes that Biden won in the states that the defendant targeted and the defendant's margin of defeat were as follows: Arizona, 11 electoral votes, 10,457 votes. Georgia, with 16 electoral votes, 11,779 votes. Michigan, 16 electoral votes, 154,188 votes. Nevada, with 6 electoral votes, 33,596 votes. New Mexico, 5 electoral votes, 99,720 votes. Pennsylvania was 20 electoral votes, 80,555 votes. In Wisconsin, with 10 electoral votes and 20,682 votes. So really, it was Michigan was the one that was not all that close at all. Everything else was under 100,000.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Georgia was pretty close. He was right.
Yeah.
Arizona was close.
Arizona was close. Georgia was close.
No.
Nevada was close-ish, but not as close as it would seem. New Mexico, not real close. Pennsylvania was real close, and Wisconsin was pretty close too. But
Yeah.
So on the same day, at the direction of the defendant and co-conspirator 1, fraudulent electors convened sham proceedings in the 7 targeted states to cast fraudulent electoral in favor of the defendants in some states in order to satisfy legal requirements set forth for legitimate electors under state law. State officials were enlisted to provide fraudulent electors access to state capitol buildings so that they could gather and vote there.
Mm-hmm.
In many cases, however, as co-conspirator 5 had predicted in the fraudulent elector instructions, the fraudulent electors were unable to satisfy the legal requirements.
Right.
So they did a shitty job.
Again.
Nonetheless, as directed in the fraudulent elector instructions, shortly after the fraudulent electors met on December 14th, the targeted states' fraudulent elector certificates were mailed to the President of the Senate, the Archivist of the United States, and others. The defendant and co-conspirators ultimately used the certificates of these fraudulent electors to deceitfully target the government function, and did so contrary to how fraudulent electors were told they would be used.
Interesting.
Yeah, all right,
come on.
Well, now you might actually have a case.
That was, yeah.
Yeah. Unlike those of the fraudulent electors consistent with the ECA, the legitimate electors signed certificates. The legitimate electors signed certificates were annexed to the state executive's certificates of ascertainment before being sent to the President of the Senate and others. That evening at 6:26 p.m., the RNC chairwoman forwarded to the defendant through his executive assistant an email titled Electors Recap Final, which represented that the 6 contested states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, the defendant's electors had voted in parallel to Biden's electors. The defendant's executive assistant responded, "It's in front of him." The defendant's attempt to leverage the Justice Department to use deceit to get state officials to replace legitimate electors and electoral votes with the defendants. In late December 2020, the defendant attempted to use the Justice Department to make knowingly false claims of election fraud in officials targeted states through a formal letter under acting attorney general's signature, yet thus giving the defendant's lies the backing of the federal government, and attempting to improperly influence the targeted states to replace legitimate Biden electors with the defendants. Through a formal letter under the acting attorney general's signature. So did
I know?
So did he sign it,
legit,
or did
they?
Did he just sign a blank piece of paper and they filled it in, or did he actually sign it?
I know. I mean,
but
it says legit, doesn't it?
Under the acting attorney general's signature. So is that where the fraud comes in, because it was not the attorney general that signed it, or he didn't actually sign off on it, or I don't know.
But he did.
Well, it just says under the acting attorney general's signature. But the acting attorney general is not one of the co-conspirators involved.
Right.
So did he actually sign it, or did they sign it, or did they take like a pre-signed, piece of letterhead or something?
That seems risky to have pre-signed letterhead just hanging around.
Well, you would think so. You would think so. On December 22nd, the defendant met with co-conspirator 4 at the White House. Co-conspirator 4 had not informed his leadership. All right, so that's a dude at the Justice Department of the meeting, which was a violation of the Justice Department's written policy restricting contacts with the White House to guard against improper political influence. Okay. Well,
who was that?
Yeah, I don't know.
See, co-conspirator 4 is trouble.
Well, 5 was the troublesome one.
Yeah, well, look at what co-conspirator 4 does. Keep going.
Yeah, that's true. On December 26th, co-conspirator 4 spoke on the phone with the acting attorney general and lied about the circumstances of his meeting with the defendant at the White House, falsely claiming that the meeting had been unplanned.
Oh.
The acting attorney general directed co-conspirator 4 not to have unauthorized contacts with the White House again, and co-conspirator 4 said he would not.
Interesting.
Yeah. The next morning on December 27th, contrary to the acting attorney general's direction, co-conspirator 4 spoke with the defendant on the defendant's cell phone for nearly 3 minutes.
Goodness.
3 minutes. That might as well be an eternity.
That's ridiculous.
That afternoon, the defendant called the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general and said, among other things, "People tell me co-conspirator 4 is great. I should put him in."
Yeah.
The defendant also raised multiple false claims of election fraud, which the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general refuted. When the acting attorney general told the defendant that the Justice Department could not and would not change the outcome of the election, the defendant responded, "Just say that the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman."
Don't worry, I'll know what to say. You're fired.
Leave it to me. I'll do it right. Just ask anybody. I always have the best words. On December 28th, co-conspirator 4 sent a draft letter to the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general, which he proposed they all sign. The draft was addressed to state officials in Georgia, and co-conspirator 4 proposed sending versions of the letter to elected officials in other targeted states. The letter contained numerous knowingly false claims about the election and the Justice Department, including that the Justice Department had identified significant concerns that may have impacted the outcome of elections in multiple states. B, the Justice Department believed that in Georgia and other states, 2 valid slates of electors had gathered at the proper location on December 14th, and that both sets of ballots had been transmitted to Congress. That is, co-conspirator 4's letter sought to advance the defendant's fraudulent elector plan by using the authority of the Justice Department to falsely present the fraudulent electors as a valid alternative to the legitimate electors.
Okay, so this might be something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That one sounds like maybe co-conspirator 4 should be prosecuted pretty heavily.
Exactly. Along with co-conspirator 5.
Mm-hmm. Did it say anything up there about Trump directing him to do that, though?
No, it doesn't sound like it.
And just say the election was correct.
He does it on his own. He calls the attorney general and lies, it says.
Yeah. Okay. The Justice Department urged the state legislature to convene a special legislative session to create the opportunity to, among other things, choose the fraudulent electors over the legitimate electors. The acting deputy attorney general promptly responded to co-conspirator 4 by email and told him that his proposed letter was false, writing, "Despite dramatic claims to the contrary, we have not seen the type of fraud that calls into question the reported and certified results of the election." In a meeting shortly thereafter, the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general again directed co-conspirator 4 not to have unauthorized contact with the White House. On December 31st, the defendant summoned to the Oval Office the acting attorney general, acting deputy attorney general, and other advisors. In the meeting, the defendant again raised claims about election fraud that the Justice Department officials already told him were not true, and that senior Justice Department officials reiterated were false, and suggested he might change the leadership in the Justice Department. On January 2nd, 2021, Just 4 days before the Congress's certification proceeding, co-conspirator 4 tried to coerce the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general to sign and send co-conspirator 4's draft letter, which contained false statements to state officials. He told him that the defendant was considering making co-conspirator 4 the new acting attorney general, but that co-conspirator 4 would decline the defendant's offer if the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general would agree to send the proposed letter to targeted states. The Justice Department officials refused. Huh. Yeah, this co-conspirator 4 seems like a little bit of a shitbag.
Yeah, right.
The next morning on January 3rd, despite having uncovered no additional evidence of election fraud, co-conspirator 4 sent to a Justice Department colleague an edited version of his draft letter to the states, which included a change from its previous claim that the Justice Department had concerns to a stronger claim that, as of today, there is evidence of significant irregularities that may have impacted the outcome of the election in multiple states. Okay, well that one seems squarely on the shoulders of this co-conspirator 4 guy.
Right.
Also on the morning of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 met with the defendant at the White House again. Without having informed senior Justice Department officials, and accepted the defendant's offer that he become acting attorney general.
Who is it?
Look it up on your phone real quick. So, Trump's last attorney general.
How many did he have?
I think he had 3, maybe 4. He had Jeff Sessions was his first one. Then it went to Bill Barr. And then I think there was 2 after that, maybe. I can't remember for sure. On the
Bill Barr, Sally Yates, Dana.
Oh, yeah. No. Sally Yates was the one that she stepped in after Bill Barr resigned, and then who was after that?
I don't know. Let me see.
Sally Yates was an Obama appointee, if I remember right. And Trump, being the genius that he is, going to drain the swamp, didn't even bother to clean house at the at the DOJ.
I know. No, it just says Bill Barr. His last day in office was December 23rd, 2020.
Okay.
But it doesn't have.
So then Sally Yates was after him, and maybe the other guy never took office. I don't remember.
Well, sure, Bill Barr was there the whole time.
I think he was there after Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions was the first one. Like that was his incoming. And then he recused himself from the whole Russia gate bullshit. And
there's
anyways,
been
so
86. Monty Wilkinson. No, he was January 20th to March 11th.
Oh, so that would have been under Biden.
Yeah, Jeffrey Rosen, that was also under Biden, right?
When was he there?
December 24th, 2020 to January 20th, 2021. So like 2 weeks.
So that would have been co-conspirator 4.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
On the afternoon of January.
Jeffrey Rosen, acting lawyer, Massachusetts.
Yeah, so
and Bill Barr had 2 terms.
Oh yeah, because he was under HW as well.
Jeez.
Yeah. On the afternoon of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 spoke with Deputy White House counsel The previous month, Deputy White House counsel informed the defendant that there is no world, there is no option in which you do not leave the White House on January 20th.
Well, that's what
Now-
co-conspirator 4 said.
No, that's what the Deputy White House counsel told co-conspirator 4, he told that to Trump, and so now the same Deputy White House counsel tried to dissuade co-conspirator 4 from assuming the role of acting Attorney General. The Deputy White House counsel reiterated to co-conspirator 4 that there had not been outcome determinative fraud in the election, and that if the defendant remained in office nonetheless, there would be riots in every major city in the United States. Co-conspirator 4 responded, "Well, Deputy White House counsel, that's why there's an Insurrection Act." All right, so this guy seems like a real shitbag. Also that afternoon, co-conspirator 4 met with the acting Attorney General and told him that the defendant had decided to put co-conspirator 4 in charge of the Justice Department. The acting Attorney General responded that he would not accept being fired by a subordinate,
Yes.
and immediately scheduled a meeting with the defendant for that evening.
That was Bill Barr.
Okay. I thought he was December 23rd, you said.
Who?
Bill Barr.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, he was the Attorney General.
Yeah, but we're on like January 3rd. I thought he was out of there on December 23rd.
Yeah, but co-conspirator number 4 is Jeffrey Rosen.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
So that afternoon, co-conspirator 4, what afternoon was it?
That was on January 3rd.
Well, then co-conspirator number 4 can't be Jeffrey Rosen if Jeffrey Rosen is the acting Attorney General.
No, Sally Yates, I believe, at the time.
No, she was the Attorney General in 2017.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Let me see.
So,
Attorneys General. I had the list and then I just logged out. Jeff Sessions, Bill Barr, Attorney Generals. I had the list a second ago. I don't know. It says to present. That doesn't make sense, does it?
Well, I don't think there was an official Attorney General between Bill Barr and Merrick Garland. I think they were all acting.
Well, that's what I was about to see. I was looking at them a minute ago, and then I...
Yeah. The acting Attorney General responded that he would not accept being fired by a subordinate and immediately scheduled a meeting with the defendant for that evening.
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
It went like this. Jeff Sessions?
Mm-hmm.
So who was in there when Trump got into the office?
That would
Sally
have been...
Yates?
Yeah.
Sally Yates, she was acting Attorney General. And then Dana Bonte for like a week, acting Attorney General. And then Jeff Sessions from February 7th, 2017 to November 2018. And then Matthew Whitaker was acting Attorney General from November 7th to February 2019.
That's when
November
Bill Barr...
2018 to February 2019. And then Bill Barr from February 14th, 2019 to December 23rd, 2020. And then Jeffrey Rosen.
Okay.
From December 24th, 2020 to January 20th, 2021.
Okay. All right. So this this co-conspirator 4 never actually became acting.
Yeah, so then they're not.
All right. So the acting attorney general we're referencing here is that Jeffrey Rosen guy.
Yeah.
So I don't know who this co-conspirator 4 is. I can't.
Nope.
Like I said, I don't remember the. On the evening of January 3rd, the defendant met for a briefing on an overseas national security issue with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and other senior national security advisors. The chairman briefed the defendant on the issue, which had previously arisen in December, as well as possible ways the defendant could handle it. When the chairman and another advisor recommended that the defendant take no action because Inauguration Day was only 17 days away and any course of action could trigger something unhelpful, the defendant calmly agreed, stating, "Yeah, you're right. It's too late for us. We're going to give that to the next guy." The defendant moved immediately from this national security briefing to the meeting with the acting attorney general that the acting attorney general had requested earlier that day, which included co-conspirator 4, the acting attorney general, the acting deputy attorney general, the Justice Department's assistant attorney general for the Office of Legal Counsel, the White House counsel, a deputy White House counsel, and a senior advisor. Yeah, rolling out the red carpet there.
Yeah.
At the meeting, the defendant expressed frustration with the acting attorney general for failing to do anything to overturn the election results, and the group discussed co-conspirator 4's plans to investigate purported election fraud and send his proposed letter to state officials.
He already did, though.
Yeah, a copy of which was provided to the defendant during the meeting. The defendant relented in his plan to replace the acting attorney general with co-conspirator 4 only when he was told that it would result in mass resignations at the Justice Department and of his own White House counsel. So he came to his senses when they said, "We're all going to fucking quit if you do this."
Right.
At the meeting in the Oval Office on the night of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 suggested that the Justice Department should opine that the vice president could exceed his lawful authority during the certification proceeding and change that election outcome. When the assistant attorney general for the Office of Legal Counsel began to explain why the Justice Department should not do so, the defendant said, "No one here should be talking to the vice president." Oh, this is Trump. "No one here should be talking to the vice president. I'm talking to the vice president." Discussion. The defendant's attempt to enlist the vice president to fraudulently alter the election results at the January 6th certification proceeding. As the January 6th congressional certification proceeding approached and other efforts to impair, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function failed, the defendant sought to enlist the vice president to use his ceremonial role at the certification to fraudulently alter the election results. I don't know that they're 100% correct that it's strictly a ceremonial role.
I know. So I was going to ask you about that ceremonial.
Like, you can call it largely ceremonial because typically they don't do much, but it's not like an abjectly ceremonial role. Like, he does serve a purpose, I think.
Right? I don't think it's just...
The defendant did this first by using knowingly false claims of election fraud to convince the vice president to accept the defendant's fraudulent electors, reject legitimate electoral votes, or send legitimate electoral votes to state legislatures for review rather than count them. When that failed, the defendant attempted to use a crowd of supporters that he had gathered in Washington, D.C. to pressure the vice president to fraudulently alter the election results. On December 19th, 2020, after cultivating widespread anger and resentment for weeks with his knowingly false claims of election fraud, the defendant urged his supporters to travel to Washington on the day of the certification proceeding, tweeting, "Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there. We'll be wild." Throughout late December, he repeatedly urged his supporters to come to Washington for January 6th, which is also not a crime.
No.
On December 23rd, the defendant retweeted a memo titled Operation Pence Card, which falsely asserted that the vice president could, among other things, unilaterally disqualify legitimate electors from 6 targeted states. On the same day, co-conspirator 2 circulated a 2-page memorandum outlining the plan for the vice president to unlawfully declare the defendant the certified winner of the presidential election. In the memorandum, co-conspirator 2 claimed that 7 states had transmitted 2 slates of electors and proposed that the vice president announce that because of the ongoing disputes in the 7 states, that there are no electors that can be deemed validly appointed in those states.
Okay.
Next, which is patently false because the governor had already certified all of them.
Yeah, except for at least co-conspirator 2 is like staying along the lines of the law.
Right.
Whereas
Next.
co-conspirator 4 was just like blatantly sending false information.
Yeah, and co-conspirator 5 was like, don't worry about the states. We'll let the Congress figure it out. You know?
Right.
Which is like the most anti-conservative position ever. Like, you let the states figure it out. Fuck the feds, you know? Like, don't tell the feds to butt out.
Right.
Next, co-conspirator 2 proposed steps that he acknowledged violated the ECA, advocating that in the end, Pence then gavels President Trump as reelected. Just 2 months earlier, on October 11th, co-conspirator 2 had taken the opposite position, writing that neither the Constitution nor the ECA provided the president discretion in the counting of the vice president provided the vice president discretion in the counting of electoral votes, or permitted him to, quote, make the determination on his own,
right,
end quote. On several private phone calls in late December and early January, the defendant repeated knowingly false claims of election fraud and directly pressured the vice president to use his ceremonial role like I said, it's not necessarily a ceremonial role.
Yeah.
At the certification proceeding on January 6th to fraudulently overturn the results of the election, and the vice president resisted, including on December 25th, when the vice president called the defendant to wish him a Merry Christmas. The defendant quickly turned the conversation to January 6th and his request that the vice president rejects electoral votes that day. The vice president pushed back, telling the defendant, as the vice president had already had in previous conversations, I don't think I have the authority to change the outcome. On December 29th, as reflected in the vice president's contemporaneous notes, the defendant falsely told the vice president that the Justice Department was finding major infractions. On January 1st, the defendant called the vice president and berated him because he learned that the vice president had opposed the lawsuit, seeking a judicial decision.
I hope there's a quote here.
That at the certification, the vice president had the authority to reject or return votes to the states under the Constitution. The vice president responded that he thought there was no constitutional basis for the authority and that it was improper. In response, the defendant told the vice president, "You're too honest." Within hours of the conversation, the defendant reminded his supporters to meet in Washington before the certification proceeding, tweeting, "The big protest rally in Washington, D.C. will take place 11 a.m. on January 6th. Locational details to follow. Stop the steal." On January 3rd, the defendant again told the vice president that at the certification proceeding, the vice president had the absolute right to reject electoral votes and the ability to overturn the election. The vice president responded that he had no such authority and that a federal appeals court had rejected the lawsuit, making that claim the previous day. On January 3rd, co-conspirator 2 circulated a second memorandum that included a new plan under which, contrary to the ECA, the vice president would send the elector slates to the state legislatures to determine which slate to count. On January 4th, the defendant held a meeting with co-conspirator 2, the vice president's chief of staff, and the vice president's counsel for the purpose of convincing the vice president based on the defendant's knowingly false claims of election fraud that the vice president should reject or send to the states Biden's legitimate electoral votes rather than count them. The defendant deliberately excluded his White House counsel from the meeting because the White House counsel had previously pushed back on the defendant's false claims of election fraud.
Pobrecito.
He's just standing up for his White House counsel, man. He don't want to get him in trouble.
Yeah, right.
You
That's what it
don't
is.
need to know about this.
He doesn't want to hear no.
This just me and the boys talking here.
Don't even worry about it.
During the meeting, as reflected in the vice president's contemporaneous notes, the defendant made knowingly false claims of election fraud, including, bottom line, won every state by hundreds of thousands of votes, and we won every state, and asked regarding claim to a senior Justice Department officials previously had told him was false, including as recently as the night before. What about 205,000 votes more in Pennsylvania than voters? The defendant and co-conspirator 2 then asked the vice president to either unilaterally reject the legitimate electors from the seven targeted states, or send the question of which slate was legitimate to the targeted states' legislatures. When the vice president challenged co-conspirator 2 whether the proposal to return the question to the states was defensible, the co-conspirator 2 responded, well, nobody's tested it before. The vice president then told the defendant, did you hear that? Even your own counsel is not saying I have that authority. The defendant responded, that's okay. I prefer the other suggestion of the vice president rejecting the electors unilaterally. That's okay. I prefer the other suggestion. January 4th, when co-conspirator, what page are we on?
35.
10 pages. We're getting there. On January
Yeah.
4th, when co-conspirator
Your kids
2
are like, when is it bedtime? I told them to go to bed, but they're like, we can't go to bed.
Also on January 4th, when co-conspirator 2 acknowledged to the defendant's senior advisor that no court would support his proposal, the senior advisor told co-conspirator 2, you're going to cause riots in the street. Co-conspirator 2 responded that there had previously been points in the nation's history where violence was necessary to protect the republic. After that conversation, the senior advisor notified the defendant that co-conspirator 2 had conceded that his plan was, quote, not going to work. On the morning of January 5th, at the defendant's direction, the vice president's chief of staff and the vice president's counsel met again with co-conspirator 2. Co-conspirator 2 now advocated that the vice president do what the defendant said he had preferred the day before, unilaterally reject electors from the targeted states. During this meeting, co-conspirator 2 privately acknowledged to the vice president's counsel that he hoped to prevent judicial review of his proposal because he understood that it would be unanimously rejected by the Supreme Court. The vice president's counsel expressed to co-conspirator 2 that following through with the proposal would result in a disastrous situation where the election might have to be decided in the streets.
Ooh.
That same day, the defendant encouraged supporters to travel to Washington on January 6th, and he set the false expectation that the vice president had the authority and might to use his ceremonial role at the certification proceeding to reverse the election outcome.
He had the authority to and might use his ceremonial role. He might.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't say he would. He had
Right.
the authority to, and he might do it. Might.
Right. To reverse the election outcome in the defendant's favor, including issuing the following tweets at 11:06 a.m. The vice president has the power to reject fraudulently chosen electors. This was within 40 minutes of the defendant's earlier reminder, see you in D.C. At 5:05 p.m., Washington is being inundated with people who don't want to see an election victory stolen. Our country has had enough. They won't take it anymore. We hear you and love you from the Oval Office. At 5:43 p.m., I will be speaking at the Save America rally tomorrow on the Ellipse at 11 a.m. Eastern. Arrive early. Doors open at 7 a.m. Eastern. Big crowds. Also on January 5th, the defendant met alone with the vice president. When the vice president refused to agree to the defendant's request that he obstruct the certification, the defendant grew frustrated and told the vice president that the defendant would have to publicly criticize him. Upon
I'm gonna
learning,
have to criticize you.
I'm gonna shit on you so hard, Mike. Upon learning of this, the vice president's chief of staff was concerned for the vice president's safety and alerted the head of the vice president's Secret Service detail.
Okay.
Okay, so you.
Right.
Yeah, nothing there. As the crowds began to gather in Washington and were audible from the Oval Office, the defendant remarked to advisors that the crowd the following day on January 6th was going to be, quote, angry. That night, the defendant approved and caused the defendant's campaign to issue a public statement that the defendant knew from his meeting with the vice president only hours earlier was false. The vice president and I are in total agreement that the vice president has the power to act. On January 6th, starting in the early morning hours, the defendant again turned to knowingly false statements aimed at pressuring the vice president to fraudulently alter the election outcome and raise publicly the false expectation that the vice president might do so. At 1 a.m., the defendant issued a tweet that falsely claimed, "If Vice President Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. Many states want to decertify the mistake they made in certifying incorrect and even fraudulent numbers in a process not approved by the state legislatures, which it must be. Mike can send it back." At 8:17 a.m., the defendant issued a tweet that falsely stated, "States want to correct their votes, which they now know were based on irregularities and fraud, plus corrupt process never received legislative approval. All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states and we win. Do it, Mike. This is the time for extreme courage." On the morning of January 6th, an agent of the defendant take over for me.
Contacted a United States senator to ask him to hand deliver documents to the vice president. The agent then facilitated the receipt by the senator's staff of the fraudulent certificates signed by the defendant's fraudulent electors in Michigan and Wisconsin, which were believed not to have been delivered to the vice president or archivist by mail. When one of the senator's staffers contacted a staffer for the vice president by text message to arrange for delivery of what the senator's staffer had been told were alternate slates of electors for Michigan and Wisconsin because archivists didn't receive them, the vice president staffer rejected them. At 11:15 a.m., the defendant called the vice president and again pressured him to fraudulently reject or return Biden's legitimate electoral votes. The vice president again refused. Immediately after the call, the defendant decided to single out the vice president in public remarks he would make within the hour, reinserting language that he had personally drafted earlier that morning, falsely claiming that the vice president had authority to send electoral votes to the states, but that advisors had previously successfully advocated be removed. Earlier that morning, the defendant had selected co-conspirator 2 to join co-conspirator 1 in giving public remarks before his own. When they did so, based on knowingly false election fraud claims, co-conspirator 1 and co-conspirator 2 intensified pressure on the vice president to fraudulently obstruct the certification proceeding. Co-conspirator 1 told the crowd that the vice president could, quote, cast the ECA aside, unquote, and unilaterally, quote, decide on the validity of these crooked ballots, end quote. He also lied when he claimed to, quote, have letters from 5 legislatures begging us, end quote, to send elector slates to the legislators for review and called for, quote, trial by combat, end quote.
That'd have been the worst combat ever.
Oh, jeez. Co-conspirator, you got it?
Go ahead.
Co-conspirator 2 told the crowd, quote, "All we are demanding of Vice President Pence is this afternoon at 1 o'clock he let the legislatures of the state look into this so we get to the bottom of it and the American people know whether we have control of the direction of our government or not. We no longer live in a self-governing republic if we can't get the answer to this question," end quote.
Next, beginning at 11:56 a.m., the defendant made knowingly false statements integral to his criminal plans to defeat the federal government function, obstruct the certification, and interfere with others' right to vote and have their votes counted. The defendant repeated false claims of election fraud, gave false hope that the vice president might change the election outcome, and directed the crowd in front of him to go to the Capitol as a means to obstruct the certification and pressure the vice president to fraudulently obstruct the certification. The defendant's knowingly false statements for these purposes included: A, the defendant falsely claimed that based on fraud, the vice president could alter the outcome of the election results, stating, "I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. All he has to do, this is from the number one, or certainly one of the top constitutional lawyers in the country. He has the absolute right to do it. We're supposed to protect our country, support the Constitution, and protect our Constitution. States want to revote. States got defrauded. They were given false information. They voted on it. Now they want to recertify. They want it back. All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify, and we become president, and you are the happiest people."
Happiest ever.
Yeah. After the defendant falsely stated the Pennsylvania legislature wanted to, quote, recertify their votes. They want to recertify. But the only way that that can happen is if Mike Pence agrees to send it back. The crowd began to chant, "Send it back." C, the defendant also said that the regular rules no longer applied, stating, "And fraud breaks up everything, doesn't it? When you catch somebody in a fraud, you're allowed to go by very different rules."
Oh, geez.
No. Finally, after exhorting that we fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. The defendant directed the people in front of him to head to the Capitol, suggested he was going with them, and told them to give members of Congress the kind of pride and boldness they need to take back our country. During and after the defendant's remarks, thousands of people marched towards the Capitol, blah, 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 blah. Defendant's exploitation of the violence and chaos at the Capitol. Shortly before 1 p.m., the vice president issued a public statement explaining that his role as president of the Senate at the certification proceeding that was about to begin did not include, quote, unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes should be counted and which should not, end quote. Which
I think he's right.
I think exactly right. Yeah, like the whole design of the American form of government is to make sure that nobody has unilateral power over anything.
Right. Exactly.
While I don't like, there's the vice president is largely ceremonial as a role in general,
right?
But he still has duties and like, well, whether you're claiming he's just strictly ceremonial for this counting, that's not true. He still has to preside over the meeting.
Right. Well, and he's vice president, or he's president of the Senate.
President of the Senate, so he has to preside over that hearing.
Right.
And so if objections are called, then they have to sort them out, which they did. Granted, it was several hours after they were supposed to, but they did anyways on the day that it was supposed to happen.
Right. They did.
Before the defendant had finished speaking, a crowd began to gather at the Capitol. Thereafter, a mass of people, including individuals who had traveled to Washington and the to the Capitol at the defendant's direction, broke through barriers cordoning off the Capitol grounds, and advanced on the building, including violently attacking law enforcement officers trying to secure it.
That's not proof.
Right. Yeah, it's in that Ray Epps deal is so amazing. There's like, this is the worst day in the history of America, January 6th. And like they sent a little old lady, 69, 70 years old with breast cancer. They sent her to federal prison for several months.
They did?
Oh yeah. But Ray Epps, a guy who's screaming, "We got to go into the Capitol," on video, and like nothing happens to him. Well, I mean, he's caught some shit since then, but like nothing legal.
Because he's a Fed?
Well, something. Whether he's an informant or an agent, I don't know, but he's
What'd you say his name is?
Ray Epps.
Jeff Ray Epstein.
Oh shit. This took a whole different turn. The defendant, who returned to the White House after concluding his remarks, watched the events at the Capitol unfold on the television in the dining room next to the Oval Office at 2:30 or 2:13 p.m. More than an hour after more than an hour of steady violent advancement. The crowd at the Capitol broke into the building.
It took them an hour. They were violent, and it took them an hour.
Upon receiving news that individuals had breached the Capitol, the defendant's advisors told him that there was a riot there and that rioters had breached the building. When advisors urged the defendant to issue a calming message aimed at the rioters, the defendant refused, instead repeatedly remarking that the people at the Capitol were angry because the election had been stolen. At 2:24 p.m., after advisors had left the defendant alone in his dining room, the defendant issued a tweet intended to further delay and obstruct the certification. Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. 1 minute later, at 2:25 p.m., the United States Secret Service was forced to evacuate the vice president to a secure location.
Pence still wants nothing to do with Trump.
No, and he still thinks he has a chance of being president for some reason. At the Capitol throughout the afternoon, members of the crowd chanted, "Hang Mike Pence, where's Pence, bring him out," and "Traitor Pence." The defendant repeatedly refused to approve a message directing rioters to leave the Capitol, as urged by his most senior advisors, including the White House counsel, Deputy White House counsel, the Chief of Staff, Deputy Chief of Staff, and a senior advisor. Instead, the defendant issued two tweets that did not ask the rioters to leave the Capitol, but instead falsely suggested that the crowd at the Capitol was being peaceful, including at 2:38 p.m. "Please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They're truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful." At 3:13 p.m., "I'm asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you." At 3 p.m., the defendant had a phone call with the minority leader of the United States House of Representatives. The defendant told the minority leader that the crowd at the Capitol was more upset about the election than the minority leader was. At 4:17 p.m., the defendant released a video message on Twitter that he had just taped in the White House Rose Garden. In it, the defendant repeated the knowingly false claim that we had an election that was stolen from us, and finally asked the individuals to leave the Capitol while telling them that they were very special and we love you. After the 4:17 p.m. tweet, the defendant joined others in the outer Oval Office to watch the attack on the Capitol on television. And the defendant said, see, this is what happens when they try to steal an election. These people are angry. The people are really angry about it. This is what happens.
Well.
And at 6:01 p.m., the defendant tweeted, these are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever.
Oh my God.
On the evening of January 6th, the defendant and co-conspirator 1 attempted to exploit the violence and chaos at the Capitol by calling lawmakers to convince them, based on knowingly false claims of election fraud, to delay the certification, including the defendant through White House aides attempted to reach 2 United States senators at 6 p.m. From 6:59 p.m. until 7:18 p.m., co-conspirator 1 placed calls to 5 United States senators and 1 United States representative.
Well, this is how they delayed the certification, by calling and checking on them.
Yeah, I guess. Those guys didn't have to answer.
Yeah.
Co-conspirator 6 attempted to confirm phone numbers for 6 United States senators who the defendant had directed co-conspirator 1 to call and attempted to enlist in further delaying the certification. So you can't confirm phone numbers now? In one of the calls, co-conspirator 1 left a voicemail intended for a United States senator that said, we need you, our Republican friends, to try to just slow it down so we can get these legislatures to get more information to you. And I know they're reconvening at 8 tonight, but the only strategy we can follow is to object to numerous states and raise issues so that we can get ourselves in tomorrow, ideally until the end of tomorrow. And another message intended for another United States senator, co-conspirator 1.
I'm expecting this to say intended for this person, but sent to the wrong person. But they don't.
Yeah. Co-conspirator 1 repeated knowingly false allegations of election fraud, including that the vote counts certified by the states to Congress were incorrect and that the governors who had certified knew they were incorrect, that illegal immigrants had voted in substantial numbers in Arizona. 5,000 people who were underage voted.
In Georgia. You cut out.
In Georgia. Co-conspirator 1 also claimed that the vice president's actions had been surprising and asked the senator to object to every state and kind of spread this out a little bit like a filibuster. Which, I mean, is that illegal?
No. I mean, is it? No.
I wouldn't think so.
No, because that's the process. That's the procedure.
The senators and the members of the House are well within their rights to object on
Right.
whatever reason. Like, for whatever
Right.
reason, they can object.
Right.
At 7:01 p.m., while co-conspirator 1 was calling United States senators on behalf of the defendant, the White House counsel called the defendant to ask him to withdraw any objections and allow the certification. The defendant refused. The attack on the Capitol obstructed and delayed the certification for approximately 6 hours until the Senate and House of Representatives came back into session separately at 8:06 p.m. and 9:02 p.m. respectively, and came together in a joint session at 11:35 p.m. At 11:44 p.m., co-conspirator 2 emailed the vice president's counsel advocating that the vice president violate the law and seek further delay of the certification. Co-conspirator 2 wrote, I implore you to consider one more relatively minor violation of the ECA and adjourn for 10 days to allow the legislatures to finish their investigation, as well as to follow a full forensic audit of the massive amount of illegal activity that has occurred here.
Man, they tried, didn't they? They
did.
Straws.
At 3:41 a.m. on January 7th, as president of the Senate, the vice president announced the certified results of the 2020 election in favor of Biden. The defendant and his co-conspirators committed one or more of the acts in effect to the object of the conspiracy alleged in paragraphs blah 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 blah. Blah 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 blah. Count 2. The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 and 8 through 123 of this indictment are realleged and fully incorporated here by reference from on or about November 14th, 2020 through on or about January 7th, 2021 in the District of Columbia and elsewhere. The defendant, Donald J. Trump, did knowingly conspire did knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators known and unknown to the grand jury to corruptly obstruct and impede official proceeding, that is certification of the electoral vote, in violation of Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1512 C2, in violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 1512K.
Gosh.
Count 3. Allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 and 8 through 123 of this indictment are realleged and fully incorporated here by reference from on or about November 14th, 2020 through on or about January 7th, 2021 in the District of Columbia and elsewhere. The defendant, Donald J. Trump, attempted to and did corruptly obstruct and impede an official proceeding, that is the certification of the electoral vote, in violation of Title 18 United States Code Sections 1512 C2 and 2. Count 4, conspiracy against rights. Okay. The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 and 8 through 123 of this indictment.
It's all the same.
The defendant, Donald J. Trump, did knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators known and unknown to the grand jury to injure, oppress, threaten, and intimidate one or more persons in the free exercise and enjoyment of a right and privilege secured to them by the Constitution and laws of the United States, that is, the right to vote and to have one's vote counted. All right, so the only reference to like an actual voter, and we don't even know if she was a voter, but the only would have been the Georgia election worker.
Lady, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm assuming she voted since she was volunteering as an election worker.
I would too.
But we don't know. We don't know. And that's the only reference they made to the actual voting public.
Like not being able to vote, but that doesn't even make.
Yeah. So that's signed Jack Smith, special counsel, United States Department of Justice. We did it, baby. We read a 45-page indictment tonight.
Only took you 3 hours and 32 minutes.
I know it. It's wild. But we got her done. And I still stick with 10 soldiers and Nixon coming.
It doesn't seem like they have much.
No, I mean, I don't know what they have on Trump for sure.
Right.
Other than saying a bunch of shit, but that's his right.
Yeah. Right.
The rest of it, it seems like co-conspirator 5, co-conspirator 6,
co-conspirator 4.
Yeah, this seems like they were
shit
some
disturbers.
They were some shysters for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It seems like, I mean, they don't call him the Teflon Don for no reason. I mean, that guy has slithered out of so much shit that I don't see this one bringing him down.
Yeah.
But it is also in DC. So is he going to get a fair jury panel? Probably not.
No.
But I think appealed to the Supreme Court. I don't see how, should they convict him, I don't see how it holds up. But I'm also not a lawyer, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what they've got either.
Yeah, I mean, and the hell of it is, it's a federal court, so it'll all you'll have the artist rendering of the proceedings, but you won't have cameras, and you'll have transcripts, probably heavily redacted.
We're gonna have to read those too.
Yeah, but since it's not in a state court, it's we're not going to have any video clips of it unless
Ugh.
for some weird reason they
And
decide to allow it, but I
when are
doubt
they
it.
going to finally take this to court?
I don't know. I guess the classified documents deal is supposed to be in May of 24. So if they follow kind of the same timelines, this would be
It's
like right at or around when the elections is happening. So
so dumb.
yeah, I think this is gonna be the Streisand effect. You know, like it's not gonna dissuade any of the Trump people
No,
at all. They're just
no.
gonna vote for him harder.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't.
exactly.
It's this all comes as there's been a
And then
bunch of
Pence
shit that
wants
come
to,
out of about Biden and his corruption. So I mean, it's real convenient when they drop these charges.
right. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I'm
I mean, after reading the whole thing, it just sounds like a desperate. I don't understand where all the conspiracy and espionage or whatever.
mhm. Yeah, like they everything he tried, he thought he was on legal footing to do,
Mm-hmm.
and at the at best, I can say he's probably guilty of being a dummy and also of his legal counsel being fucking awful.
Well, I think maybe his
That's
legal counsel's not that great, but I just think he thinks he's infallible. So I think that he just is like, do whatever,
yeah.
and that there aren't going to be consequences for him because he's the
Well,
Teflon Don.
I mean, isn't that the story of every dude in power? Like
Well,
they'll
yeah,
float
right.
something until and they'll get shot down and shot down until they somebody goes along with what they want. I mean, that's
Well,
the whole George Bush presidency was based off the theory of like the unitary executive, so that like in a time of war that the president could essentially do whatever the hell he wanted to, and that was, I mean, they never kind of turned down that notion that even though like
well,
in
you
legal
had to give
theory is
George Bush all of the control. Look what happened. He was only president for 9 months.
yeah
9/11 happened, and sheesh, you
yeah
know. But I
so
think everyone was really disappointed when he didn't just go blow up the whole Middle East. No.
yeah, well, I mean, he just didn't do it immediately. It eventually blew up on itself, but
Everybody wanted immediate.
I know it.
It didn't
Yeah,
happen.
we could have nuked the entire Middle East and the
Mhm.
American public wouldn't have batted an eye.
Turned it to glass. That's what they wanted.
Yeah, I remember hearing that
Yep.
exact phrase said
Yep.
many times. But anyway, what do you think? You think they're gonna convict him or?
I don't think so. I think they're going to try to distract everyone. I think they'll find a reason to be like, this is uncalled for. This has no precedence. You got no footing on this. And then but again, I didn't think he'd even make it very far in the debates in 2015. So, I mean, remember, I thought this is a joke.
Yeah,
What's this guy doing here? You can't be serious. And then he was there, and then he was the nominee, and then he was president. And so I also thought there was no way they were going to mandate masks. You got to wear a mask. No way. You can't tell people that. You can't tell people that if they don't get this vaccine, that they're going to lose their job. And all of this shit has happened. So,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, anyway,
hmm
good enough time to end it all, I think, or in this show.
No,
Not end
just
it
this
all.
session. Yeah, calm down.
Yeah,
What are you-
just this
Hurts.
show. But it
You go.
like I'm proud of us. We read that whole damn thing, which is more than will be said for most of the pundits that are talking about this in the morning.
Well, now we'll know.
Yeah.
We can call ourselves experts.
There seems to be a case against some of the co-conspirators.
Yeah, how come these
I just
don't have any charges against them?
Yeah, because I think they cooperated with the special counsel.
That's
or
why
whatever.
they're
They got immunity.
anonymous. Right.
Yep.
Bullshit.
Anyway, well, that was fun. I'm glad you joined me.
Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Go check out the store. Go check out Patreon, patreon.com/burning-daylight. Burning-daylight. For the website, click on the supply house. We got some shirts, we got some stickers, we got some koozies. Got a hat up there, and we'll have some new designs up there all the time. We're gonna we're gonna spin that thing up pretty big, I think. Hopefully anyway. So go check it out. We got some cool stuff.
Move your ass.
So we're burning daylight.
See.
Tin soldiers and Nixon coming. We're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming for dead in Ohio. Gotta get down to it. Soldiers are cutting us down. Should have been done long ago. Wanna give you her and found her dead on the ground. How can you run when you know? Gotta get down to it. Soldiers are cutting us down. Should have been done long ago. What if you knew her and found her dead on the ground? How can you run when you know? Tin soldiers and Nixon's coming.